Good morning, councillors, officers and members of the public. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Strategic Planning Board. I'm Councillor Stuart Gardner, your chairman for today's meeting. I will begin by explaining some ground rules for those taking part in the meeting to follow. Please can you keep your camera and microphone switched off unless I invite you to speak. This is to ensure that only one voice can be heard at any time talking without interruption. This also helps to avoid feedback and background noise and to save bandwidth. For members of the board wishing to speak during a debate or raise a procedural point, please indicate your desire to do so by using the chat facility, which can be accessed via the information bar near the centre of your display. Should any of you realise that this is not working, can you please indicate by raising your hand and we will use that facility going forward. Present at today's meeting are members of the Strategic Planning Board. I intend to call their name one by one and ask them to switch on their camera and microphone to introduce themselves and confirm that they can see and hear the proceedings. And I begin that now by calling Councillor Anthony Critchley.
I'm here, Chair. Yes, I can hear and see.
Thank you very much, Councillor Critchley. Councillor Steve Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashley Farrell.
Hello, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Groves.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor David Jeffrey.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Hogben.
Hello, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rob Morton.
Hi, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Patrick Redstone.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Chair.
And Councillor Jackie Wetherill.
Good morning, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Phil Williams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can both see and hear.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Also present are the following officers who are here to advise the board regarding the items on the agenda. They are Sarah Baxter, our Democratic Services Officer, Adrian Crowther, Major Applications Team Leader, Tom Evans, Neighbourhood Planning Manager, Sheila Dillon, Planning Lawyer, Neil Jones, Highways Officer, David Malcolm, the Head of Planning, and Emma Williams, the Principal Planning Officer. I will now explain how the board will operate. The Planning Officer will introduce the item, show slides, photos and plans regarding the site. I will then invite any registered public speakers to address the committee and ask them to switch on their camera and microphone and state that their name and the name of the group they are representing. I will inform them how much time they will have to speak and that they must finish within this time or their microphones may be muted to enable the meeting to move along. If anything the public speaker has said was unclear, I may allow members to ask questions of clarification. Once they have spoken, the public speaker will turn off their camera and microphone and listen to the rest of the debate and decision. The planning officer will respond to any issues raised by the public speaker, and then members will be able to ask the planning officer questions before moving to debate the item. I remind members to indicate in the chat function if they wish to speak during the debate. When the debate moves to a close, I will check whether the officers have any final advice to give and that the terms of the resolution which will have been moved and seconded are all clear. I will then invite each member of the board in alphabetical order to turn on their camera and microphone to confirm their support for the resolution or otherwise by stating for, against or not voting. The result of the vote will be reported to the meeting. Members of the board can only participate in and vote on the item if they can hear and be heard throughout. If a member loses their connection and is able to alert this fact, the meeting may be able to be adjourned for a short period to allow them to reconnect. If they are unable to connect within a short time, the meeting will continue without them and they will be unable to participate in or vote on the application. If the live stream of the meeting fails, the meeting will be adjourned for a reasonable length of time to try and restore the connection. If this is not possible, the meeting will be postponed to a new date. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live to the public. We will now move to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, apologies from Councillor Hunter.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from board members? Please can members indicate in the chat facility and I will then ask them to make a verbal declaration. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding item 5 on the agenda, I have received a leaflet from the applicant in the post, and I am also a member of Western Parish Council, which this development is within. I haven't discussed the matter on that. In the interest of openness and transparency, Chairman of the Public Rights of Way Committee, who are consultees on items 6 and 7. But again, I haven't discussed anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hogben.
Hello, Chair. Well, first of all, I think, like everybody else, I've received a leaflet from the applicants or from the Housing Association in relation to item 5 on the agenda. And my other declaration is my usual one, again in relation to item 5, that I'm a non-executive director of ANSA, who at some point have been consulted on the application, but I've not discussed it or commented on it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Chair. I've also received the leaflet mentioned by my colleagues in relation to item 5. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm assuming we have all received that leaflet and therefore we'll make sure there is a blanket declaration in the minutes for the interest of clarity and openness. So I'm going to go through the rest of you, but if that's all you have, so I've now got Councillor Redstone.
The same, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yes, Chair, I also received the leaflet, but
fine.
I haven't actually read it.
No, no, neither have I. I only opened mine came here and I only opened it this morning. So Councillor Morton. Councillor Morton, I'm asking you this question because people can't read the chat box, so I need to clarify that because you've indicated.
Yeah, I've also received the leaflet.
Okay, and
I haven't read it or anything.
And Councillor Farrell.
Yes, I also received the leaflet.
Thank you very much. Are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you very much. We'll now move to item 3, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous 2 virtual meetings. I intend to call separately approval of these minutes because attendees will differ. I will look first at the meeting that took place on the 23rd of September 2020. Can I ask somebody to propose that these are correct record of the meeting, and then if that is proposed, somebody to second. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose those minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And a seconder, Councillor Groves. You're on mute, Councillor Groves.
Sorry, Chair. I'm happy to second the proposal.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to invite the committee members in alphabetical order to confirm their support or otherwise by stating for, against or not voting. When members do so, please will they turn on their camera and identify themselves. And those members who were absent from or not present for the whole of the previous meeting cannot vote to approve those minutes. So I'm going now, Councillor Critchley.
Chair.
Okay, abstain, thank you. Councillor Edgar.
For.
Councillor Ashley Farrell.
For, Chair.
Councillor Peter Groves.
For, Chair.
Councillor David Jeffrey.
For, Chair.
Councillor Steve Hogben.
Not voting.
Thank you. Councillor Rob Morton.
Not voting.
Councillor Patrick Redstone.
I've got an objection regarding these minutes, Chair. It's regarding the item regarding the sorry,
Is this the meeting of the 23rd?
23rd, yes, I think so. Here we are. It's regarding the Radway Green site, Radway Green North.
On what page the minutes?
That's on page 10 of the minutes and
right.
Page 11. During this, we discussed that, and the client's representative agreed that the lighting scheme could have the hours of its limited, so it could be turned off effectively during part of the night. This hasn't been picked up either in the minutes nor in item number 16.
The words that you see there, Councillor Redstone, are the an indication that there will be a lighting condition.
Exactly.
That does not mean that the points that were raised will be incorporated within that condition. The condition is not published in full at this stage.
Can I seek reassurance that the hours of the lighting scheme will be discussed and it will be discussed with the town council?
There has been an indication of this before. The matter will be. We have checked the notes of all officers, and my recollection of that item, and is that the issue. The first thing, yes, you can seek confirmation that, and I will ask the clerk to put that in the minutes now as an addendum, that the item relating to the hours of operation of those lights will be included within condition 16 specifically. With regard to the involvement of the parish council, we can find no recollection that that was agreed in the resolution, although we do accept it was a point raised in discussion, both in debate and in questions asked to speakers. So that is the point. It's not that did not form part of the resolution on which voting took place. However, I am sure, given the positive nature with which the applicant was prepared to discuss the materials employed in the outside, that they would not be adverse to discussing the lighting with the town council at the same time. But in terms of the minutes are accurate. Okay. So, so will you be supporting or abstaining or voting for the minutes, Councillor?
If that's the case, then I can support the minutes.
Thank you very much.
Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Redstone. Councillor Jackie Weatherall.
For.
And Councillor Phil Williams.
Can I just check, am I allowed to vote on this? Because I took part as a ward councillor in the debate on Radway Green rather than as a member of the panel. So does that?
You were absent from part of the, and you were technically absent from part of the. In that case, you should abstain.
In which case, I will do so, certainly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Right, we'll now move to, and for members of the public, this might seem a little bit old school, but unfortunately we are legally required to do this. So we're then voting to approve the minutes of the meeting that took place on the 2nd of October 2020. Can I ask for someone to propose these as the correct record? Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose those, please.
Thank you very much. And a seconder? Councillor Groves, you've got your camera on. Are you indicating a willingness to second?
No, Chair, because I was absent from the meeting.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hogman.
Yes, I'll formally second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hogman. Right, we'll now go to again asking for, against, or not voting. Again, if you were not present for part of the meeting or you were not there at all, you cannot vote for these minutes. So, Councillor Anthony Critchley.
I will be abstaining, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Steve Edgar.
For.
Councillor Ashley Farrell.
For.
Councillor Peter Groves.
As I've already said, Chair, that I was absent for the meeting, so I will not be voting.
I appreciate that, but I do have to go through the record.
No, it's quite I quite understand. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor David Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Steve Hogman.
For.
Councillor Rob Morton.
Not voting, sorry.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patrick Redstone.
For.
Councillor Jacqueline Weatherall.
For.
Councillor Phil Williams.
For.
Thank you very much. Item 4, public speaking. This sets out how the public speaking rules for this committee will operate. We will now move to our first, sorry, I have to read the script. That doesn't make sense. Basically, for purposes of this meeting, what happens is, unlike other committee meetings of the council, what happens is we have the public speaking as part of the agenda item rather than as a separate public speaking item. That is for members of the public and those watching on live stream. So we will now move to item 5, application 19/5934 N November, approval of reserved matters following outline approval 14/405 November, outline application for the erection of up to 490 residential dwellings and a primary school of 2,000 square metres (D1), a pumping station, substation, recreational open space, ecological mitigation area, internal access routes, ground modelling and drainage works, parking provision, footpaths, cycle routes, landscaping and associated works, including details of access at the Basford East site crew, Phase 1, Basford East Land, David Whitby Way, Weston, for Mr. Rob Stratton, Lane End Developments. I will now ask David Malcolm to present this item.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. I'll just share my screen so I can bring up the presentation for you. And I'll just, oops, you won't be seeing that just yet, just bear with me. There we go. Through you, Chair, can you just confirm you can see that?
Yes, I can, Mr. Malcolm.
Okay, thank you. So members will be aware this was an application that was brought to them only a couple of meetings ago, and it was effectively deferred for more detailed plans, particularly in regard to the house types and concerns over sort of the longer term. Do we have enough information regarding the character and appearance of the scheme, and then particular concerns around the school drop-off area, consideration of potential traffic calming, and also different access to serve the school. Now those are dealt with within your report, and I'll pick those up as I go. But just as an aid memoir to the site itself, I'll go through all of these in limited information, limited detail, sorry. So this is the actual application site, site edge red, and this is the application site to the south of Crewe. This is Western Road, takes you into the Crewe town centre. This is the allocation within the local plan strategy, which covers a large area either side of the new road that's gone through. The site that we're looking at is in here. This is another site on the other side that already has a residential approval mixed scheme with some commercial in here, and then there's further allocation to the other side. This was the layout plan that we saw last time, and you'll see again the sort of the key parts of this are very much about the linkages through. You've got this sort of greenway connectivity through to other parts of the site. This is where the access point will be itself, and I'll come back to this bit in a second because that's where the drop-off zone was. This is where the proposed school will go. That's not part of this application, and you can see the general layout of the scheme with mitigation, pond mitigation, and you can also see the landscaping around the edge of the site, some of which is already in place along the road frontage there. That was just a detailed plan that again we had last time, similar scheme, just a bit more detail on that one. This was the landscape plan, which very busy plan. So just to zoom in, just to give you some indication of play areas to the south of the school, multi-use games area, and then this is the pedestrian cycle route through the site, and that continues through to the other side, and then there's links all the way into effectively what will become a further allocated site of South Cheshire Growth Village, just to the sort of northeast of where the site is. That's just a phasing plan of how the site would be constructed, with the first parts being those closest to the access road here. That was just a 10-year plan to pick up some of the points I think that was raised yesterday, last meeting. And there's a more detailed breakdown of the homes on page 24 of your agenda. That's just the completeness of the shows you the breakdown between affordable, shared ownership, and open market sale. So these are the sort of the additional plans that aren't in your pack because of the file size. But this shows more detailed work that's come in since the last meeting. These shows the character areas, and these slides now shows a lot more detail of those character areas, and you'll see the next few slides give you the breakdown, both in terms of the palette of materials that we'll be using for what's referred to the avenues. That's the main route as you come into the site. You've got the what's classed as the urban heart. Again, slightly different palette of materials, but similarly a similar design to reflect the overall sort of sense of place, which is what we're obviously after. This is the green corridor that runs either side of that main connection, if you like, through from pedestrian crossings across the main road frontage, brings into the site, and then, as I said, goes off up to the South Cheshire Growth Village allocation. Referred to as the Green Heart, and again, slightly different palette, but again, you can see there's a common theme running through the development. And likewise, slightly less dense along what's referred to as the woodland edge in this instance. So all of that is the sort of thing that we have started to become accustomed to on the larger schemes to reflect the Cheshire East Design Guide requirements and the Building for Life requirements. And I think in terms of the character, we do now have that detail throughout the site. And here's just again a selection of house types. These are also quite detailed, but you can see a selection here of the concern for members last time was not having all of the detail up front, considering this was a detailed planning application following the outline approval. So this is really just to confirm there are obviously more house types. There's a suite of house types across the whole site, but again, it just gives you hopefully some confidence that we do have those detailed plans now across the site. And then just finally, just some further illustrations and visuals across the site. Again, this is from the green areas you approach the site. Obviously, again, you'll see the style and the sort of the sense of place that we're trying to create. This was the sort of the avenue and what's referred to as the square, where the road goes off into part of the residential areas, and again, what's referred to as secondary residential area within that urban heart, and trying to create the feeling of different palette of materials, so you've got a slightly different sense of place which reflects that urban area, if you like, within the centre of the site. And again, looking towards the village green, so you can see there, you know, the detail is there, and just to bring that to sort of into shape, I suppose, officers are comfortable that we've now got, and hopefully members will be, that we've now got a full suite of details of house types provided for all the phases and all those character areas, which gives us good you know, detailing of all of house types. We've got those particular character areas, and we're now satisfied that it's sufficient towards the in terms of building for life assessment, it would now be a green, and we do create that character not just of individual house types, but actually more importantly a sense of place that will be, you know, it's not just an anywheresville, it's something that you can pick up and you'll be able to sense that you're in a different area of Crewe, and a very sort of different area in terms of the character. So that deals with the design issue. The one other issue that was picked up before was in respect of the school drop-off area, and I'll just quickly flick back just for members, just for recollection purposes. See which one I should use. Let's use that one. So in effect, it was this area here. This is the school site, and that is to be delivered through by the council. The land is being transferred across to the council, and you'll see within your report 2023 there's details in there of the type of, it's going to be a 1-form entry school initially, potentially up to 2-form in the future. But the approach that the council has to delivering schools is that they don't incorporate drop-off zones within schools, but they do incorporate enough parking to accommodate staff within the site. So quite rightly, members raised concerns last time. This additional parking area wasn't actually on the original plan submitted by the applicants. It was submitted in response to concerns, I think, raised by the parish council in terms of, well, is it not going to cause issues in terms of with the school here and traffic flows in and out of the site. But the fact remains, as members did highlight last time, is that, well, if you've got a drop-off zone here, does it not create an issue in terms of getting across to the school? Or kind of an obvious issue. So having discussed it both with education and also with highways, there's no actual requirement for that drop-off zone. And actually, I think as members did, you know, highlight and understandably highlight, I think, is that it does potentially create an issue that we don't really need. It's there to satisfy concern from the parish council, which I think is acknowledged, but both education and highways don't think it is there. So I think for officers, we're creating a problem that doesn't need to be there. So the issue for us in terms of is that it doesn't need to be there. It potentially creates a problem, as members highlighted last time. So officers are proposing that we actually just remove that parking area from the application itself, which is so there's an additional condition which basically deletes that off the scheme. And that's again effectively just to get rid of that issue, because it's not necessary. So I think in terms of the what that does do, I think is also deal with potentially the traffic calming issue. Highways don't feel there's a need for traffic calming in the area, and therefore I think with the removal of the additional parking area on the other side, again, officers don't feel that would be necessary in any event. I think the final point that was just a concern, if you like, was an alternative access point to the school, and whether access could be coming in from different parts of the site, if you like. But again, it's been looked at, and effectively it's not considered as a viable option in terms of the way the school would be developed in the future. and it's considered that the access is suitably located, and therefore it is the most practical point, both in terms of land take, but also doesn't cause a highway issue. So I think, Chair, those are the main points that are picked up and addressed, and therefore from an officer's perspective, we do believe it is something that now can be supported and therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malcolm. I am conscious that some members indicated that there was a problem with sound. However, it appears to be a short-lived, we're talking seconds or minutes, rather than a significant part of your presentation. But that might mean you might end up, Mr. Malcolm, with questions at a later stage, thinking, well, I've already answered that, and that will be the reason why. Just so there wasn't enough loss for us to have to repeat anything, I don't think, at the moment. So I'm now going to ask Parish Councillor Cornell, who represents Western and Basford Parish Council, to address the board. If he can please turn on his microphone and camera. Councillor Cornell, you have 5 minutes to speak, after which there may be questions from members of the board. So if you can turn your camera and microphone on now, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you and I can now see you, so you can begin.
Well, I'm not going to repeat, Chairman, what I said last time, but given the report now before you, the Parish Council is concerned that we're likely to have a significant safety issue, and this is the dropping off and picking up arrangements for the school, or the lack of them. This will be a major new housing development and primary school built for the 21st century, and it won't only serve the proposed 450 new houses on Basford East, but also the South Cheshire Growth Village, which is another 650 houses, and the surrounding area. I have to say we're very disappointed that despite our consistent representations, there's still no detailed footprint for this school, and we have real difficulty in reconciling the officer's statements with the likely practical reality on the ground once this becomes operational. We know for a fact that more often than not, schools drop off and pick up times result in congestion to varying degrees. But within our parish, we experience particularly severe problems. You may recall last time that I mentioned Witchwood Village and the picking up and dropping off of children. In addition, Western Primary School, this is a one-form 200 plus places, it's a constant headache at critical times of the day with the police regularly involved. The drop-off of children in the morning coincides with a rush hour. In practice, it's potentially difficult, if not impossible, to enforce walking and cycling to the school. And most children are either bussed in, very large buses I must say, or brought by private transport, and in the main, in Western, it's four-wheel drive large SUVs. Now, the officer's report states the proposed schools designated to grow to a two-form entry. That's over 400 places. Add this to the occupants of the 450 dwellings, many with more than one car, and there's little or no public transport, wanting to get to and from this development at peak times, using the single access onto David Whitby Way, abutting the school. In our view, the result could well be chaos, particularly as the report appears to be recommending the picking up and dropping off of children on the estate road. Once the detailed layout has been approved, this is what worries us. Around the school, the position will be locked, and there'll be no flexibility to modify any detailed arrangements. We urge members from the Parish Council to look again at an alternative point of vehicular access and egress. Parish Council is not convinced this isn't viable. Also, to look whether some form of off-street facility can be provided within that layout safely, adjacent to the school, for the dropping off and picking up. Finally, I stated last time that Basford East strategic sites intended to be an exemplar development for others to follow. The proposed school arrangements, in our view, certainly don't reflect this. should the layout be approved in its current state and problems arise in the future, I have to say the local community have now stated, we told you so. Chairman, that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Town Councillor Connell. I would like to say before I go to questions that we are not considering the details of the school as part of this application. That would be the subject of a further reserve matters application, which I'm sure your council would be will be able. I know your council will be able to make representations on separately, just as a point of information. So, are there any questions to Councillor Cornell? I have no indication. Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Councillor Cornell. Yeah, in regards to what you mentioned about the drop-off point, on the last meeting when we deferred the item for consideration to give into the drop-off point, our reasons for doing that were for safety reasons about the crossing from the drop-off point to the school, and also maybe traffic calming measures to be placed there. Do you think the the officers' suggestions to completely remove the drop-off point is a sufficient solution to that?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I would have thought that drop-off point, or even something on the other side, and it might just mean modifying layout, could be controlled and managed. Because there's various aspects to traffic management. They certainly need something, and that does worry us, removing that condition.
Okay, and just as a further question, as a local councillor, you know the area, could you just expand, answer some sort of my questions about, if that is just a single access point to the number of houses, potentially up to 420 school children going to the school once it's done. We've got thinking ahead. What sort of, traffic issues that may cause in the future?
Well, I think it will cause it'll cause a lot of congestion, particularly at peak times. It's certainly the morning peak in Western that we have real problems with. And there's also safety of children, and you've got deliveries there. Everybody from this development has got to feed out onto this David Whitby way to get out. And as I said in my statement, people today, they've got more than one car. Let's face it, there's little or no public transport. So this access onto David Whitby Way is going to be extremely heavily used. It's the only way out of this development unless something else could be put in.
Thank you. And just one final question on that, because you raised it. In regards to David Whitby Way, therefore, could there be potential for backups of traffic all the way onto David Whitby Way once this is done?
I think there could, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Cornell. I think Councillor Farrell's asked some of the questions I was going to ask on the transport side, but I'd just like to ask a little bit on the character and design side, if I may. I know that's not the main point of your question here, because it's health and safety and parking. But last time there were concerns about the design and the character, particularly in a kind of edge of town, rural sort of location. Are you now satisfied about the design aspects, given the character aspects that have been outlined to us by David Malcolm?
Put it this way, Chairman, I'll be quite honest, I'm not totally satisfied, but I realise we're living in the real world and there's a point of compromise. I can understand the varying house types, and if this landscaping is maintained and we can get some sense of community, I don't think the parish council is now raising this as a, you know, live or die issue. The main issue is this school.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cornell. If you can now turn off your camera and microphone and listen to the debate in that fashion, please.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I now intend to call Steve Heveron, who's representing the applicant, to address the board. Mr. Heveron, can you please turn on your screen and your microphone? And you have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, can you hear me? Just to check. Yeah.
Yes, and we can see you.
Okay, great. So yeah, well, thank you for giving me the time to speak. We got from the last committee meeting that this went to some valid and important challenges from yourselves, and we've spent the last 6 weeks focused on responding to that challenge and really taking a fine-tooth comb to our application in order to make sure we can address your concerns. So, I mean, David Malcolm covered a lot of what I was going to say, so I've only got 3 minutes, so I may as well use them, but you know, there'll be a little bit of repetition there. Working closely with those planning officers, we've sought to significantly increase the detail provided in terms of the character areas, the materials, the palettes, the house type design information, and we've clarified the officer-led advice regarding the approach to the school drop-off. Summarising then what we've done, the additional detail on the house types and the character areas. You've seen the CGI information on the presentation that David did. We have fresh street elevations and a whole suite of information now in the planning pack. And we've essentially, in a nutshell, provided as much detail regarding the last house in the final phase as we have on the first home of the first phase. So we think we've done quite a lot of work to try and get over that. We now have 12 house types and 70 variations over those 5 different character areas, each variation reflective of where it sits within that character area. As you've discussed, members also sought additional details on the school proposals. I won't go over that in great detail, but we remain flexible. We consider that this is now kind of resolved through the highways and education officers, but we remain flexible within our application as to the ideal solution for the school drop-off. As you say, it is a separate application. That school site is contained. It's also worth noting that the scheme is truly a kind of a tenure blind scheme, and our objective has been that throughout, to create a mixed income, mixed tenure community with an increased level of public open space over and above what we would have thought would go into the what was in the outline planning application. And finally, I probably just want to stress that Onward Homes, picking up the final point that Councillor Cornell made in terms of landscaping and design. Onward Homes as a landlord is invested in this community for the long term. So, you know, unlike some developments, in 30 years' time, we will still be here providing services to our rented and home-owning customers, things such as landscaping and so on. So we've got a strong commitment to doing things that lead to the best local outcomes. So I hope that comes across in the information that we've provided, and what we tried to do was just summarise everything for you, because there was a lot there and a lot of changes, so we just wanted to make it as simple to see as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Heveron? Councillor Farrell, and then Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Mr. Heveron. Just a couple of questions, really. I just need on the designs. It's not sorry, not on the house designs, on the plan. It's not quite clear to me. There may be an indication there, but I just want a bit of clarification. Where the drop point is on the design, is there a crossing, some sort of crossing between over the road there? Is it like a pedestrian crossing of some sort there?
On the original, so the first point to make is that the plan that you see that the planning officers have put into the pack remains the same as previously, and I think it's their intention to omit that as a condition of planning approval. As it stands, we remain flexible to put in whatever the planning highways officers wish us to do with regards to that. That's how that drop-off point occurred in the first instance. I think we're waiting for the outcome of the school design proposal, and we're happy to flex whatever we need to do to make sure that it's the right solution for the school, which I think at the moment has been outlined as, let's omit that parking drop-off zone and deal with the school application in isolation kind of thing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. So there's not so basically there's no crossing point there at the moment, but you would be flexible.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And further into the design on further into the development, these I've noticed on the character areas there are areas of traffic calming, these like humps in the roads. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any reason why that same traffic calming measures that are in the development in the character areas couldn't be placed nearer the school?
There's no reason.
As well?
Yeah, no reason whatsoever. I think the advice we've taken is the advice from the conversations we had at pre-planning meetings, and I say, things like traffic calming were perfectly amenable to whatever the preferred solution is.
Great, that's that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ms Heverin. So obviously we've only heard about this change to the drop-off point at this meeting. So if I'm interpreting it correctly, that the parking bays on the left-hand side are probably going to go. My question is kind of following on from Councillor Farrell's. Would the intention therefore be to move that estate road further north to buy some more space on the school allocated site? Now, I understand you've got some discussions to have, but if we approve this today, is the position of that road set in stone such that we can't move it north slightly where those parking bays are at the moment?
Yeah, no, I understand. I think I would say for the purpose of this approval, it's set in stone in so much that the land ownerships are set in stone. But again, kind of echoing my previous point, we're not adverse to finding the right solution. As much as Councillor Cornell and everybody else wants there to be the right solution for children being dropped off and not being back up of traffic, we're exactly the same. So it's set in stone in so much that the land ownership is. However, we're happy to have conversations about how to improve. If we think that moving the road to the north
in your ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great, thanks very much.
Councillor Hogben.
A question that keeps going around my head at the moment, excuse me, is if there are parents or people delivering children to school arriving from on the David Whitby Way and then left into the housing area, I just wonder, and I can't see from the plans where this would happen, how would they turn around? And later on I shall ask the planning officer, well, perhaps David Malcolm can note that as a future question, and maybe for the highways people who appear to have be against the drop-off area. So my question to you and to them actually is, well, where would such vehicles turn around?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and one that I probably would immediately refer to David, given that the solution within the school site should work with the proposed access road that we've got off David Whitby Way. And yes, it needs to be considered, and I'd imagine that the planning application for the school site would take that into account. But I would refer to David and kind of seek his guidance on that, really.
Because I mean, in a way, we're talking about a planning application that hasn't yet been made. Because I have to think, think about, well, the primary school where my granddaughters go in Hertford, not in this borough, where there's almost a little roundabout and the park and the drop-off point within the, pretty sure it's within the curtilage of the school, this is at Hertford Manor Primary School,
Mhm.
a number of drop-off points, well, parking points, and so it serves two purposes. Vehicles can drive in there and then turn around and then go back down what is actually an estate road. I think looks to be like social housing, in fact, so it can be very congested. Do you foresee, or maybe somebody else foresee, that might be the kind of safe solution? Because I personally don't think very good idea to have a drop-off area on the other side of the road, especially with this issue of where do the vehicles turn.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, you make a good point. I know that school as well. I'm from Hertford, but I think the 2 points to that. One is, I guess that's a question for highways and for an application that hasn't yet been made. From our point of view, with our application, the road does specifically loop round to allow the bus route. So that's how we've taken into account that, using advice from highways, knowing that the school site is going to arrive at some point. So yeah, I'll probably refer to highways colleagues or David Malcolm on that point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heffernan.
No problem.
If there are no more questions to Mr. Heffernan, thank you very much for joining us today. If you could please turn your camera and your microphone off in order to save our bandwidth and watch as the public are having to watch. Thank you very much. Can I please remind members that when they are asking questions, they should be asking questions. And while I fully appreciate the purpose of Councillor Hogman's explanation just now, because it did serve to lead into the question, it does mean that I'm being looked at saying they should be asking questions. So can you please keep your introductory explanations brief before you ask your question, please? Right. I'm going to move to see whether there are any questions to officers, and I know what I'm going to do, Councillor Hogman, is I've made a note of your question. I hope that Mr. Malcolm has too, and that yours will be the first. Yours will be the first question that will be answered by Mr. Malcolm when he comes back to answer those questions. Are there any other questions for the officers, either Mr. Malcolm or the highways officer, regarding this application before we go into debate? Councillor Redstone.
Well, my question is actually directly to David Malcolm. I agree with all the other councillors. Parking and access to this school for people who do not live on this estate is potentially a major problem. And we've seen in other schools where this has occurred that it's something which has to be thought at the building stage. In other words, at this stage, not when the school is built, but before the school is built. So I'd like to know, what is your solution? How are you going to manage this traffic so that the residents of this estate can leave at the same time as other parents are dropping off their children?
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just exactly the same as my question to the applicant, really. Just whether David Malcolm will be able to work with the applicant to move that road north to buy a bit more space to enable drop-off within the school boundary.
Thank you very much. Right, before I go to Councillor Williams, I'm going to ask Mr. Malcolm to come back, because we had 3 questions, all of which are of related nature.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this obviously seems also from the speakers. So I think before come on to specific questions, I think, well, I know the surrounding area, both this site, the adjacent site on the other side of David Whitby Way, South Cheshire Grove Village, is potentially going to deliver close to something like 1,400 or so houses. And therefore the emphasis on these sites has been very much about connectivity of non-car-borne nature in terms of cycling and walking, and effectively linkages between all of those sites, with the school being centrally located within those sites. So while I completely understand the issues that schools currently, if you like, endure, and the constant drop-offs and pickups, etc., we do need to start the trend to basically look at getting children, if you like, walking and cycling to school, and therefore reducing the emphasis on car-borne drop-offs and travel. If we don't, then we will never fix the problem to an extent. But I'm not. I'm realistic enough to realise it's still going to happen. But the reality is there is the expectation that this is delivered in a sustainable manner, and that's the direction that both for me as head of planning, but also as a council, we want to be supporting sustainable travel, reducing environmental impact, climate change agenda, etc. So again, realistic about it, but we do need to change the emphasis and actually say let's provide the connectivity so kids can actually walk to school for change. I know it's a long time ago, but I used to walk to school. I'm sure most members probably at some point did walk to school. It's not how things are done these days, and I appreciate all sorts of reasons why that's the case, but just to put the context of it is that we do want to sort of try and emphasise that sort of sustainable nature as opposed to the drop-offs. In terms of the specific point around the drop-off area, I think in terms of picking up, well, it's Councillor Jeffrey's point, I suppose, in terms of the parking bays, the access into the site, so the stub into the site is already fixed, it's already there. I'm pretty sure, and Neil Jones can confirm this shortly when I'm sure he'll pick up some of the issues, but it would be virtually impossible to move the location of the road sufficiently and get the required sort of grade, if you like, in terms of the access into the site. So I think moving the road to the north to absorb some of the space won't actually be the answer to the solution, because it won't deliver the same. I think the point being is, could we then deliver those drop-off parking spaces on the other side of the road as part of the school application? I don't think it will deliver the same space as we've got there at the moment anyway. So I think in terms of moving the road, I don't think that's a solution that will work. I think in terms of the point that Councillor Hogman raised in terms of how do people turn round when they drop the kids off, well, I guess they carry on round the estate into the site and go down the route that the bus would go, which is the route around the development. I have to re-emphasise again, the education team and highways don't think there's an issue in terms of drop-off. They don't encourage drop-offs within their development sites, so that's why it's not something that's built into the scheme. I think picking up the wider points about how will traffic manage, I'll probably come back to Neil on that one in a second, but ultimately the expectation is that there may be some sort of short inconveniences for certain times of the day, again to reflect as other schools are. But in terms of the scheme has been designed to manage traffic effectively, and highways are saying that's acceptable, and I'm sure Neil Jones can confirm that in a second. I think in terms of just picking up the point of the drop-off zone itself, it creates a particular issue at the moment because of the potential for kids going across, walking across a road if they get dropped off. So that's why the suggestion has been to take it off the scheme at the moment. Clearly, there's an indication from the applicants that they're supportive of putting something in there if it was needed. We've suggested removing it at the moment, but we could certainly work a condition that sort of doesn't get rid of it completely, and it perhaps looks at an alternative flexible solution that maybe when we get more details of the school coming forward. But I do think we need to sort of acknowledge the point that members raised before, because it's certainly a valid one, is about the issue about dropping off and then kids having to walk across the school from there, which isn't something that we'd want to necessarily encourage, albeit again traffic speeds are such that it's not expected to be a problem. So I'm happy to be sort of work with the applicants to sort of reword that condition, but I think it's something that isn't necessary at the moment, but we could leave it as a sort of perhaps an option once we know when the school comes forward. Is there something that land could be made or made use of that perhaps isn't a drop-off zone or something along those lines? One thing did cross my mind potentially, but it's not something that we could deal with now. Was just could it be something where staff could park there if it was an issue, for example, and therefore would that assist? But I think, we've said before, the school isn't part of this application. We've got comments from our own education team saying they don't encourage drop-offs within the school sites. They will provide the appropriate buildings and they'll provide a staff car park, but they don't encourage anything much more than that. So I think I've addressed most of the questions. There was a point, I think, about public transport. I mean, obviously the scheme has been designed for a bus to come into the site anyway. So again, that's part of the longer term provision of facilities that will enable a bus to come into the site and around the estate. So I think that picks up. I think that picks up the main points for now, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Before I ask Mr. Jones to give his views about technical matters, can I check whether Councillors Williams and Farrell want to ask questions about highway matters? Because if they do, I'll ask them to speak first. Councillor Williams.
Yes, my question is.
If that's a highway question, can you please ask a question now before I go to Mr. Jones?
Okay, my question was about traffic calming. We've had the applicant, Mr. Heverin, said about they're open to that idea. Unless I'm missing something in the report, it's sort of fairly, it says highways don't see any need for traffic calming. I'd like to know a little bit more the reasoning for that. Is that because it's already addressed, because the applicant's willing to consider those measures, or is it because they don't see a need for it in the first place? I'm a little bit confused about that. It might be me, I don't know, but that's what my question's about.
Okay, Councillor Farrell, is your question about highways?
Yes, Chair, 1 second.
In that case, can you ask a question before I go to Mr. Jones?
Good. Is given that the applicant has stated they're quite open to quite flexible.
Can you turn your camera on, please?
Oh, wait 1 second.
Are you experiencing problem? Carry on speaking, Councillor Farrell. We've obviously got a problem.
Yeah, so, as the applicant has stated, they were quite agreeable and flexible to. I'm here.
Yeah.
Quite flexible and agreeable to the drop-off point and crossing points. I'm also kind of confused as to why highways has said it's not necessary, basically, because whether or not you have the crossing point, and as Mr. Malcolm said, in future we want people walking and cycling to school, regardless of whether you've got a dropping point, there's a road there to cross. So you're going to need a safe place for people to cross the road. As the applicant stated, they're willing to put that in and flexible on that. I'm kind of confused why the highways officer said it's not necessary. Also, on just a suggestion, with the drop-off point, is there any reason why that drop-off point at the moment it's got a single access at the top at the north? Why couldn't it be an access so you enter from the south, go in, drop off, and come out the top at the north and go out? Why can't it be an in and out drop-off point rather than an in and out drop-off point? If you see what I mean. If you look at the plan, it's just got a single access where it could just be like a loop drop-off point, and that therefore resolves the issue of people having to turn around instead of having to go through the whole estate to turn around, which would be a nightmare, in my opinion, for the residents. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Jones, can you answer those questions, please? Or address them?
Well, thanks, Chair. I think perhaps to start on with access, just to talk about access with members. We've been talking to the applicant for a long time on this one, talks about the school and where the best position of the access should be. And it's been a difficult one for us to look at. But I think members need to be aware, wherever the access goes, there's going to be on-street parking. There's definitely, with schools, there definitely is on-street parking. So wherever that access goes, there will be on-street parking. So what we've done is looked at what is the best place to have the access. And I think the access is in probably the best place it can be, because if we have it at the back or anywhere else, it will cause parking issues for the residents, for future residents of the site. There'll be on-street parking causing issues. We can't have it off David Whitby Way, obviously, because there'll be issues on there. So I think we're fixed with access to where it is at the moment. We've heard this morning about drop-off zones. From a highway point of view, we don't think the school site's big enough to have a drop-off zone within it and deliver the school itself, because it would be a fairly big area if that was the case for a drop-off within the school. So we've ruled that out. I think it's only big enough to accommodate staff parking. So looking at the issues about drop-off, we have to obviously recognise that wherever a school is, there's going to be on-street parking for parents dropping off, and obviously we are promoting sustainable travel, etc. But there will be parking on street, and we've looked at whether the drop-off zone that we've formally looked at, we accepted that was a possibility. That was a recommendation last time out, and members didn't feel that was, well, I think the resolution was the safety issue. If that was to come forward as a drop-off facility, we would want a formal crossing point across the access for safety reasons, if that was the case. But talking about this particular application, we think that there will be on-street parking will be able to accommodate the school drop-off, and the on-street parking itself would be a traffic calming feature in itself. So speed should be low on that section of road because of the car parking. If there was a requirement for traffic calming to come forward, then I think we probably would support it. There may be some flat top humps to put in to reduce speeds, but we don't think at the moment that traffic calming is necessary at the moment. So really, I think we're in support of the application at the moment, is that we have to accept that the school will have some on-street parking, but it will be in the best location on the site. Thanks, Chair.
I have two further questions, so I don't know whether these are for you, Mr. Jones, or whether they'll be for Mr. Malcolm. So I've got Councillor Hogben and then Councillor Redstone. Councillor Hogben.
So, two things. Initially, and I will form a question. Initially, the proposed school, when it comes about, will be a single form of entry. So it will be smaller than it's going to be in the end, like when the South Cheshire Growth Village comes about. So surely there would be room within the that site, excuse me, room within that site for a turning circle, even if it were only for the first few years of the life of that school. That's one question. And secondly, the crossing point to which you refer, does that have to be a capital investment, like whatever it might be, a zebra crossing or toucan or pelican or whatever it might be, or could it be a good old-fashioned lollipop person? I think that's about it. And the other point is, anyway, I think the use is likely, I'd suggest that the use of deliveries of children to school by road probably might be greater at the beginning of the life of the school, because it may be used as an overspill for Western Village. So perhaps at a later point, when we reach the goal of walking to school or whatever, then it will be outside of the catchment area for distant places like Western Village. But I mean that seriously.
I'm going to ask for several questions, and then if you can come back afterwards, Neil, that would be easy. Councillor Redstone, and then Councillor Farrell.
This is for Mr. Jones. What is the speed limit on the estate?
I can answer that question straight away, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be 30 miles an hour speed limit within the estate.
Thank you very much.
Right. And is there any way that could be reduced to 20 miles an hour?
We don't know. We don't have any 20 mile an hour zones officially within any residential developments in Cheshire East at the moment. It would be, we have them obviously in lots of other areas, but there's none in Cheshire East at the moment. It would need a traffic regulation order to reduce that to 20 miles an hour. And we would need a design to 20 miles an hour. And this has been designed at 30 miles an hour. So the design would probably need to change if that was the case.
And do you think this would be a solution in terms of road safety for these children crossing this road?
I don't believe that there will be a safety issue. I think the safety issue that members envisage is crossing the road from the parking area potentially that's going to go forward. And if that was the case, we could support some sort of crossing zone, whether that be a formal crossing or a raised table or something for people to cross the road. We could support that. We don't believe that the speed will be too high because it's only really a short access road from the residential area to the roundabout. So we don't believe they're going to be really high speeds anyway. But for safety reasons, if members thought that there was a crossing point needed, then we would need some sort of potential crossing point of the road to the parking area across the road.
Right. And do you think that having an entrance and an exit to the parking area that's shown on the map, that would be a solution for turning the traffic round?
Potentially, we could have another access at not too close to the roundabout. It might need to take some spaces out of that area to get an access through, because we wouldn't want it close to the roundabout, but potentially could be 2 access points to that area.
And do you see any other problems with that solution?
Well, we supported the application initially with this parking for the school. So, you know, we're not going to change our minds now. We did support that. And if there was another access needed to that area, then we could look at that.
Right. And do you think railings along there would also help to funnel the children across to the crossing area?
Yeah, I think we'd probably need to think about just if there was a crossing point, we would probably need to think about how we make sure that people did use it and not just cross at any point across the road. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farrell.
Hello. Thank you. Actually, Councillor Redstone asked my questions, just for clarification on the in-out draft point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Malcolm, do you want to come back before we go to the debate on any other questions, incidentals that may have been raised as part of the questioning of Mr. Jones?
I don't think so, Chair. I think it's just trying to just clarify and go back to, you know, we're not planning for the school. I suppose this isn't part of, and I suppose the issues that Neil Jones has raised. I mean, we've looked at all of these relevant issues before. Like I said, there is some flexibility around the drop-off zone, but I think just to go back, I think in terms of the sort of design and you know, talking about road speeds and everything else, the scheme is designed to reduce road speeds anyway. The design of the scheme, irrespective, yes, it'll have a 30 mile an hour limit, but the scheme that is being designed to reduce traffic speeds in any event, it's part of Cheshire East Design Guide. It's why I think one of the councillors mentioned sort of different surface treatments. It's designed to basically make some of these areas where you've got much more pedestrian friendly environment. It's not designed as what you might refer to as sort of like the traditional housing estates, where you've got a 30-mile-an-hour road, and it is designed in a way with different materials to reduce traffic speed. So it's an accessible development. So that was the only point I was just going to pick up, Chair. And I think in terms of the other points, like I said, there's a bit of flexibility, but again, we have to be careful. We don't know what the school is going to be yet, and therefore we're designing something for something that we don't know actually how it's going to look. And to get into discussions about railings, it's just not something that we would need to get into at this stage. Clearly, whenever the school comes forward, there'll be safety issues that will have to be taken care of as part of that application. And as we know from other applications that we've had for schools or in and around schools, safety is a big part of that. So I think, yes, happy to sort of discuss and let members debate the parking area, etc. But let's not get too far into the detail of what we're looking at here. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's also important to note that it is this council's officers in the education team who are saying that they don't want the proposition of the drop-off zone. It is not something that the applicants are suggesting themselves. Right, I'm going to go to the debate now, and my recollection is that Councillor Edgar is the councillor whose ward it doesn't encompass is nearest to this site. If I am wrong, I apologise to any other councillors who I have wrongly indicated it being Councillor Edgar, and I'm sure I will be corrected in the chat facility. So, Councillor Edgar, if you'd like to start the debate, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is within my ward and also the parish. I've heard an awful lot with regards what could happen and what may happen with regards to safety and the access. But I do feel that by putting it forward as it is, it's creating a fait accompli which will have to be worked around by the school application when it comes in. And I appreciate it's not something that we can discuss now because we don't know what the school application is going to be. I am a little bit more comforted by the fact that that lay-by could well be removed from the application. That was a concern. And if it has to stay, then I think it would be compulsory to actually have a pedestrian crossing there. I will listen to further debate before I actually make my mind up as to which way I'm going to vote on this one. Thank you. As far as the application and for everything else, I am reasonably happy. Design, etc. It's just this access that gives me a level of concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edgar. Are there any other comment that people want to speak in the debate? Unless the chat box is broken, I'm not seeing anything. Farrell. Councillor Farrell, would you like to speak? Oh dear.
I've lost mute.
You're on mute, Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just every time I take the mic off, it just like delay. Thanks, Chair. I don't think the camera's working anymore. Yeah, I'm just kind of perplexed, really. When we deferred this item last time, it was about basically it was on the design of the house types, and then basically the safety of crossing from one side of the road to another. And that crossing of going from one side of the road to another, it's going to be there whether or not there's a lay-by for a drop-off point or there isn't. Because, like we say, we want to encourage people to walk and cycle to school. Then, therefore, there's going to be a need for a crossing point. And when you've got an estate of speed limit of 30 miles an hour, and I take on board the comments about the design statement, the design plan for slowing down traffic. But if the speed limit is 30 miles an hour, people will travel at 30 miles an hour. We have it all around. Anywhere you go, people doing 30 miles an hour where they can. They go as fast as they can where they can. So I'm kind of perplexed that the suggestions coming back are to remove, in conditions, to remove the drop-off point altogether, really. That's just like, oh, we'll just get rid of that solves the problem. It doesn't solve the problem at all. I would like to propose that instead of condition 22, where it says school drop-off area to be omitted from the scheme, in place of that, we condition that the drop-off area will have 2 access points, a one-way system, which will enable safe turning and safe drop-off of children. And then also, as the applicant has been completely agreeable and flexible, they said that themselves when asked, to put in place a traffic calming measure, such as what we've seen elsewhere in the character areas of the plan, with the raised, I don't know what you call it, raised road, and also obviously where the drop point will be, there will be safe crossing points. So that's my proposal.
Okay, before you go any further, Councillor, and before you switch your camera and microphone off, Councillor Farrell, are you proposing that all other aspects of the recommendation remain the same? So you are proposing that we approve the scheme subject to the modification of that condition?
Yes, Chair. So I'm quite happy with the rest of the application. It's just that point on the drop-off point and also safety measures. As the officers have said, there's no reason they stated there's no reason why there couldn't be a second access point to the drop point to make it a one-way system, and also opportunity for people to turn around without going into the housing estate. And also the applicant has said they're quite happy to put in traffic calming measure and the crossing point there as well. So I feel that my proposal is in line with the officers and the applicant's feedback. Thank you.
I'm sure that Mr. Malcolm and Mr. Jones might wish to advise us about the appropriate wording of what you're proposing, but we can deal with that later. Councillor Redstone, I'm conscious of your comment in the box, but there are other people wishing to speak, so I'm intending to call them first and then call you, because then you can do what you are proposing in the box. So Councillors Williams and Jeffrey, in that order, please. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've listened with a lot of interest to the debate, and particularly Neil Jones's comments, and I can certainly see on the plans that to a certain degree traffic calming is built in terms of design, and I think that's very good. I can envisage how that would happen. Nevertheless, I have a slight concern, and I understand that there is no sort of alternative to sort of roadside parking, but then my concern there is it could spill over into pavement parking, and we do have a lot of issues across the borough with that. Now, I know this isn't old, Victorian terraces. This is a more spaced development, but having driven around a number of new sort of non-traditional estates which are designed in this way, there are lots of visitors and things parking on pavements, and so part of me, the benign part of me thinks, yes, highways have done the job. They've done a great job in terms of the design, because that sort of designs out some of the problems. But the cynical side of me thinks, well, hang on, it could create other problems, particularly around pavement parking. So that's an issue that I have a slight concern about. On the design aspects, I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised. I think the designs of the houses were better than I was expecting them to be, and I certainly concur with Mr. Malcolm's statement that it should now go to a green. I'm totally satisfied on that score. Totally satisfied on the terms of accessibility, like the green corridor, that side of things as well. And I think we are, to a certain extent, got one arm behind our back because we don't see the whole thing in its entirety, but I'd certainly take on board the aspiration that's clearly there for the area as a whole in terms of connectivity, cycling, walking, etc. But we're not going to see that until it's all developed. But coming back to the points that Councillor Hogman's raised, I think he's raised an interesting and valid point, I think, about the life of the school in terms of how that works as people get more used to the school being there, then that will encourage more walking. But in the initial stages, certainly there will be a lot of drop off in traffic. And I think what Councillor Fowles proposed makes eminent sense. I noticed that in the chat, I know you're going to come on to this, that Councillor Edgson's proposing to second it. At the moment, I am inclined already that space hadn't been claimed by Councillor Edgson. I'd be happy to second that myself, but I'm interested to listen to a little bit more debate, as I can see that there's other people wishing to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Redstone, would you like to speak now and hold forth on any seconding at this stage? Because I don't want to have to go to the debate before everybody's been heard to speak, but I want to give you an opportunity to speak as you were in the queue before others who have since listed wanting to speak.
Well, basically, following on from Councillor Williams, I agree with what he says, and this is the reason why. In fact, I funnily enough, had written down almost exactly what Councillor Farrell had said as a proposal, and that's why I warmly want to second and support that proposal. My reasons also for wanting to support this is because so often we've had applications before us and we took it on trust that these things would be okay, and we found out later that they weren't. So I think we need to be more proactive, and if we see something which we think is a problem, we should address it straight away and get it down as a firm condition. Otherwise, we are jeopardizing future generations to our mistakes, and I think that's just not acceptable. So I warmly support this application, and I hope the rest of the committee will support this too.
Thank you, Councillor Redstone. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Edgar, in that order.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think I can support Councillor Farrell's amendment, because I don't think we're qualified or experienced in planning sufficiently to be able to start specifying what we want in terms of one-way systems and layouts. I think that's a bad way to go. We're not professionals. We don't know the rules, so we leave that to the likes of Neil and Dave Malcolm. And from that perspective, I think, given that we've been told that there's not going to be room on the site for turning circles and what have you, I'm almost inclined to say that the parking bays on the northern side of the road are probably better than the alternative that we're going to end up with, which is parking on the road. However much I dislike the idea, as was stated at the last meeting. But I'm really not. I don't know where I'm going to go with this, because I'm really not comfortable with designing in problem. We know it's just been acknowledged we're going to have these parking problems, and I accept that we should be designing for sustainability and not giving the parking spaces and asking, but we've got 10 years of this situation before mindsets change completely and sustainable, and people don't drop the kids off on the way to work and things like this. We need a change of mindset, and that's not going to happen in the short or possibly medium term. So I really don't know where I'm going to go, but yeah, I'm afraid I can't really, at the moment, I can't see the amendment, because we are not planning professionals or highway engineers, and we should not be dictating or specifying things that can't actually be delivered. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I now have Councillor Critchley, then Councillor Edgar and Councillor Hogburn, in that order. Councillor Critchley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm almost inclined to agree with Councillor Jeffrey on this one. I can see where Councillor Farrell and Williams are from, and I agree broadly, especially with what Councillor Williams was saying. that we don't want the on-street parking, which is obviously a blight across most of the areas around Crewe, particularly Crewe South, where this development is. So I at the minute I'm on the fence as to whether to agree to that or not myself, and I think obviously it's in the pack on page 23 about whether it's necessary or not because of the speed of the traffic. So I'll hold fire on that one. There's two little points that I would make though, and it's just completely out of the box and probably misplaced for this arena. For so long we've talked about a post-Brexit world, and now obviously we're going to have a post-COVID world. One of the ways that impacts life is the dropping off and picking up of school children. And I think that's again that is completely misplaced in this arena. And the other one is there a precedent anywhere? Now this is for you, probably, Councillor Gardner, because of your extensive knowledge in the field, where these kind of roads and these situations are left unadopted and picked up by residents groups or police.
In answer to your question, Councillor Critchley, I can see the steam coming out of Mr. Jones's ears of a suggestion that we have unadopted highways, the number of vehicles that will be using this, and of course the school itself will be facilitated. That is, to a certain extent, is part of the problem. But I understand where you're coming from, and coincidentally, your reference to the B word in your opening, it was also referred to at the briefing yesterday about whether or not, because of COVID, not of the B word, because of COVID, there may be fewer parents who are working away from the home, and so therefore may be more inclined to walk their children to and from school. But that is a separate matter. I will leave the professionals to answer the technical issues. Okay, if we now go to Councillor Edgar, please, and then Councillor Hogben.
Thank you, Chair. Will the application for the school come before Strategic Planning Board? Is a question maybe a bit late. And if it does, I think it would be appropriate place to decide it because of all our concerns. And we can at least look at a design which potentially is going to work and we're all going to be happy with. I think condition 22 is the removal of the drop-off zone. I think potentially is a mistake. I think it should be kept in as an option. Are you with me? And then maybe with a highways design or a planning officer design, something that could be worked into it rather than remove it completely. The way the debate is going, Mr. Jones and Mr. Malcolm, I am more assured that some solution can be resolved with safety in mind, be it a pedestrian crossing, being it a raised dais area, all sorts of things can be done. So I do think it would be a mistake to actually omit 22. It should be kept in reserve, I think, as a possibility.
Councillor Edgar, my understanding of the proposition by Councillor Farrell, which is potentially seconded by Councillor Redstone, is that the condition be retained but amended in its wording to incorporate other elements, such as the provision of a safe crossing facility, and also the provision of some form of traffic management within the estate road. Now, those are both matters. Now, I understand where Councillor Jeffrey is coming from regarding it is not our job to deal with the technicals, but it is not inappropriate for us to make suggestions around which the professionals would come up with a form of words that facilitate what we're looking to achieve without specifying the detail. So we'll come to that at a later stage. But I'm conscious that Councillor Hogben wishes to join the debate, so I'm going to ask Councillor Hogben to come in now, and then I will go back to the officers for some suggestions.
At the risk of being further admonished, straying from the issue, I would actually say it wasn't me what started the discussions about crossings and to the school in the future. It was an issue that's been addressed partly by the deferral of this application from a couple of months ago. But anyway, it won't be the last time I do that, I can assure you. So I await further disciplinary action by somebody or other. Actually, you made very well the point that I just wanted to raise myself, which is Councillor Farrell has made a suggestion about that condition 22, which which requires a bit of assistance from our highways professional, Mr. Jones, and I'm sure that Councillor Farrell would be only too happy to take on board the precise wording that might be suggested. So I think it's entirely yes, we don't formulate the detailed conditions that go out in a decision notice, but we do make suggestions. So broadly speaking, I'll be content to support the proposition as it is emerging at the moment. And I'm glad actually that Councillor Critchley just made the point about, life post-COVID, because that's probably post-COVID-19 probably will be about the same time as Councillor Jeffrey's 10 years hence or 5 years hence. Don't want to cheer anybody up, but well, I'm obviously succeeding in that. The world is being changed by the pandemic, and that will impact upon working habits, school habits, a whole host of things, and certainly the future of the internal combustion engine as we know it. But I run a risk of straying. However, this is the debate, and this is the opportunity, a strategic planning board, to look ahead, because I've often thought, well, yes, we should concentrate on the planning of applications themselves, but also look ahead. That's why we're called a strategic planning board, not just a development control committee, even if I'm going to be told next that's all we are really. I'll stand back now, thank you.
I do not disagree with your comments, Councillor Hogben, at all. I think we are perhaps occasionally too interested as a board in the minutiae, and that is because those are the items of the planning agenda that we most are able to relate to, and perhaps we don't have enough blue sky thinking, for want of an appropriate Americanism. So I have no more members wishing to speak in this debate. I now wish to allow Mr. Malcolm to come back before I ask for the matter to be formally proposed and seconded. And I'm hoping, Mr. Malcolm, in your words, you will provide us with an appropriate form of wording that might be used in order to facilitate Councillor Farrell's suggestions.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether it facilitates that exact suggestion, but I was going to offer a suggestion. Picking up the comments that members have raised, I'm trying desperately to scribble down a condition that enables to look at this when the school comes forward, because I think the issue is that we've got is, as members have alluded to, we've got the clear information from highways that all is okay. Education is saying they don't want a drop-off zone. So that is the council saying that. It's nobody else. It's not the developer saying we're not prepared to provide something. So and what I'm trying to just come up with is a condition that will enable details of this drop-off area, as in, is it required when the school comes forward? What's the form of it? As in the in-out. I can see myself, and I know it might technically work, but I can see that itself generating more issues as well, because you've got coming off the sort of the roundabout and everything else. Does that actually mean that people are just going to use it to turn around and drop the kids outside the school on the other side of the road, etc.? All of the issues that we know we've dealt with. So I was trying to just come up with a condition that would be able to deal with this. So I'm thinking along the lines of the details of any drop-off zone to be, a scheme to be submitted prior to the school occupation or something along those lines, that basically picks up the points that quite, I think Councillor Farrell, I don't necessarily disagree with what's been said in terms of keeping the drop-off zone. The developer's ultimately the developer will be is flexible. They're willing to put in the drop-off zone. So I think in terms of in those terms, they don't have a problem with the drop-off zone. But clearly, it's a concern about if we do put the drop-off zone, how does that impact on the school and the safety of children? But what I wouldn't want to do is immediately say that we definitely need the drop-off zone, which, as Councillor Farrell and others have said, would then come with the in-out, the traffic calming and some form of crossing point, because we don't really know whether those would be required. And that's kind of why I need to sort of almost push this down the line in some way. I can't quite come up with the words, not that straightforward, and normally you can't have one application that then imposes something on another application. But in terms, I think it's just a timing issue here. There's a willingness from the developer. So what I was going to suggest, Chairman, because I want to come up with a condition that is both soundly based, it's lawful, but also is something that we can work with the developer to pick up the points that members have raised about. There's clearly well, I feel there's a move from members that they want some form of drop off if it's required, but they want the facilities to go with it that maintain safety for children. So I was going to suggest that the condition is delegated back to pick up those issues that members have raised. It's a discussion point between myself and the developer, come through you, Chair, to then just safeguard that. I need to check it with legal as well, but rather than sort of defer now to sort of take a few minutes to come up with that condition, it would be to basically clarify that. And I know, I think it's Councillor Hogburn has suggested possibly using an informative to provide that, but I think members want strength in the condition, and informative, to be honest, is something on a piece of paper that doesn't really mean that much, whereas I think I want to do justice to members' concerns and say, actually, we will put some form of condition in that can deal with that. So that's my suggestion. I'm happy to take a view. It's just I can come up with some words, but it's just it would be along the lines of, I say, details of any drop off with associated facilities to be submitted alongside the school application. But I need to be really careful in terms of how I word that in order to make sure it's a lawful condition. So that's my thinking at the moment, Chair. Okay. I don't know if that helps or not.
Before I go to Councillor Hogburn, Mr. Malcolm, can I remind you and other officers that the chat is only visible by those people who are in the meeting itself. So that's officers, members of the board, and those persons who have registered to speak. So in order that we as a board are seen to be public facing, which is what we are supposed to be, can I ask that you don't make comments on things you see in the chat? Anybody makes comments on things they see in the chat room, but that those matters are verbalised. So I am now going to ask Councillor Hogburn to raise the point that he put in the chat box, so everybody knows what he asked. And then, Mr. Malcolm, can you please answer that position accordingly? Thank you. Councillor Hogburn.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have been asked to verbalise any comments I might have. It's just as well I don't verbalise all the comments I could make. But the particular comment was, surely we can make use of an informative. I mean, the issue is it's not even so much about a drop-off point itself. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. The issue we're concerned with is how we're going to deal with future traffic, cars and other vehicles and buses even that might come to this site. I'm not bothered whether that's perhaps, well, it could be an informative. It could be what Mr. Malcolm suggested, that condition be sort of worded subsequently, if you like, delegated back to himself and whatever, in consultation with his health chair, subsequent to the meeting. We do enough of that anyway, because, as it says normally, in order to give proper effect to the Strategic Planning Board's intent and without changing the substance of its decision, authority is delegated to the head of planning in consultation with the chair, or in their absence the vice chair, to correct any technical slip or omission in the resolution. Well, I mean, we can always add to that, of course, or to supplement, because the intent, the wish of the committee is pretty clear, and it's the wish of the local community that that the future road traffic to this location, even if it's only for half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, that actually it is dealt with, could be dealt with through an informative at this stage for future reference. But that, as Mr. Malcolm has said, that's maybe something to be debated with the lawyers, and something that could be, you know, it does need to be fed into the whole thing, and be in some way enforceable by the authority, preferably in agreement with the developer, who seems to be very amenable anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malcolm. Do you wish to reiterate anything that you've said already, or are you confirming that a condition is the requirement?
Yeah, I suppose just to reaffirm, I think a condition is required. I think the informative doesn't give us quite enough. And like I said, I think we can come up with the basics about, you know, notwithstanding the details of the scheme that's being submitted at the moment, albeit it's a very, you know, high level scheme. It's just some parking space on the plan. It's just trying to get in the timing issue. So effectively, it's whether the drop-off zone is actually required, whether the developer will you know, contribute to whatever is required at a point in time, and it's that point in time because we don't have that certainty from our education team just at the moment. They're obviously working on it, but they don't have that certainty of the scheme. So so that's just, I mean, normally I'd be able to sort of come up with something and give that certainty, but I just think I would just like the time to pick up, if members are amenable to it, that we come up with the suitable safeguards that picks up exactly the point that Councillor Farrell and others have made in terms of if it is required, and maybe picking also the point that Councillor Jeffrey made about actually letting us as if you like the technical experts just make sure it does work. So if an in and out is something that again is being put forward, but does it work? We've not had it put before us. We perhaps just need to just look at that technically just to double check. So I wouldn't want, you know, I wouldn't want members to commit to something now that technically just gives us some issues and isn't quite the right thing. But I've got, you know, very much a clear steer, I think, from members that there's an acceptance that they want to make sure that we're not leaving a problem for the future, and notwithstanding the desire to make kids walk to school, etc., we recognise there is an issue that we need to resolve. So I do think genuinely probably the best would be to delegate that specific point back, to pick up the points around the drop-off zone to include an in and out, the traffic calming measures such as a raised table and a crossing point. So we've got those 3 points, but it's just then checking whether that works with the school when it comes forward, and that's purely why I want to sort of formulate a condition that can do that. I suppose I'm picking up what's been moved and I think seconded, but just saying actually, can we just defer that, make sure it all works, and therefore delegate that back for us to deal with that offline and get it okayed by either yourself, Chair, or the other Chair, etc., to deal with that. So that's my proposal, Chair.
I would be included even if the chair is the normal chair is there, because obviously I was present at the debate. Councillor Farrell, are you happy to use the form of wording that's been suggested by Mr. Malcolm in your proposition to approve this scheme?
Chair, I just wanted to clarify. So the removal of the current condition 22 to be removed and then replaced with condition to look at ways to facilitate a possible in and out of the drop-off point, and also to include traffic calming measures and crossing points for the road.
Those are the 3 points that Mr. Malcolm wishes. We'll form a form of words that will be both legally appropriate and obviously fulfil those 3 requirements. Councillor Redstone, so are you happy to propose along those on that basis?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Councillor Redstone, are you happy to second?
I am, Chair.
Thank you very much. I now intend to, that is the end of the debate, and I now intend to ask members whether they wish to vote for or against the proposition that has been proposed by Councillor Farrell and seconded by Councillor Redstone. So I will now go to the Register. Councillor Anthony Critchley, can you indicate whether you are voting for, against or abstaining?
I'll vote for.
For. Thank you very much. Councillor Steve Edgar.
For.
Councillor Ashley Farrell.
For.
Councillor David Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Steve Hogben.
For.
Councillor Rob Morton.
For.
Councillor Patrick Redstone.
For.
Councillor Jacqueline Wetherall.
For.
Councillor Phil Williams.
For.
Councillor Peter Groves.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you'd forgotten me. For.
I'll explain why. I have the register I have before me reflects something else, so don't worry. So if anybody else has not been, I've not called, can you please indicate? Right. I am now myself going to vote for, as the more observant among you will have noticed that I failed to do so when we were approving the minutes because my name wasn't on the register. So thank you very much. That is clearly carried. Members of committee, we have spent almost 2 hours now in committee, and the next item we have may take some time. So it's my intention to postpone this meeting for 5 minutes to facilitate comfort breaks. I will see you all back at 11:56, please. Because I added myself. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all with me. I'm now going to take the register to ensure that everybody has returned, and I will be using an up-to-date version. So, Councillor Anthony Critchley, can you please turn your screen on and your microphone so we know that you're able to do so? Councillor Critchley. Okay, I will come back to Councillor Critchley. Councillor Edgar.
Just forcing a chocolate biscuit down, yes.
Forcing a chocolate biscuit down, that's interesting. Okay. Councillor Farrell. You just turned your mic off, Councillor Farrell.
On? Hello?
I can hear you now, that's fine. Councillor Groves, I can see.
Yes, I'm here and I can hear you, Chair.
And just for your ease of mind, Councillor Groves, you have been added to the script for future votes.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted you've reassured me.
Councillor Jeffrey, I can see you.
Yep, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hogben.
See me, hear me.
Councillor Rob Morton.
Yeah, I can see you. I can hear you.
Right, Councillor Patrick Redstone.
I can see you and hear you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Jacqueline Weatherall.
Yes, Chair, see and hear.
And Councillor Phil Williams.
Yes, I'm going to be more holier than thou than Councillor Edgar and say I've only had a digestive biscuit.
Okay. And if I can go back to Councillor Anthony Critchley to make sure that you're with us, Councillor Critchley. Councillor Critchley. Councillor Critchley, we can't hear you. Can you turn your microphone on, please?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes, we can. That's fine.
I think it's this meeting. I'm not being. It's nothing personal against anybody in here. Like, I just really have difficulties with the technology for this meeting. Well, if you can hear me, I don't know if you can see me.
We can't at the moment, but don't worry about that because I can hear you. That's all I wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Everybody's back. So I am now going to move to, and this is where, because I've moved the script around. I'm now going to move to item number 6, which is application 192173W, extension to Bent Farm Quarry for the extraction of sand and progressive restoration. Bent Farm Quarry, Wall Hill Lane, Brownlow, Congleton, for Maria Cotton of Sibelco. And I'm going to ask Emma Williams to present this item. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen.
Thank you. For your information, Emma, I can see that.
Thank you, Chair. So this is Bent Farm Quarry. The quarry has been operational since 1981 and is located approximately 1.3 kilometres to the west of Congleton. It's accessed from Wall Hill Lane, which is located off the A534. And the A534 connects Congleton with the M6 motorway. The application site comprises the proposed extension area, which is here, which is to the west of Wall Hill Lane, which runs down here, and incorporates the current plant processing area for the quarry, which is over here. You can also see in blue the remainder of the quarry land and the current area of extraction, which is here, and the areas of restored land here. The proposed extension area comprises of agricultural fields and covers an area of 40 hectare. Pitcher Lane runs down the western boundary, which is here. The A534 to the north, Wall Hill Lane to the east. And you can also see the second part of the application site here, which covers the plant processing area. So you've got the main processing equipment over here, the lagoons, the access road and the conveyor belt. The closest residential properties lie on the application boundary to the north, here. One's adjacent to the plant site, here. One down here, and one in the southeast, just down here. And there's also footpaths and bridleways running along here. So this is the proposed extension area looking south, which, as you can see, comprises a series of fields bounded by mature trees and hedgerows. You will see Wall Hill Lane just off to the left-hand side here, just running down this edge. And the two closest receptors to the extension area on the southern boundary, just in the top corner here. This is the proposed extension area looking north towards the A534. You will see Wall Hill Lane running down the right hand side. And at the top is the closest receptor on the northern boundary, just up there. And you'll see the edge of Pitcher Lane just off here. This slide shows the views from those two same receptors. So the top picture shows the view that the property on the southern boundary would have looking into the site. And the bottom picture shows the views of Wall Hill cottages looking into the site from that northern boundary. This is the view of the current plant processing area. So you'll see the quarry entrance, which is down here, the main quarry processing plant, the lagoons, and the other quarry infrastructure. And there's a conveyor that's there. And you'll see the closest property to the plant site at Quarryside Bungalow, just down here. You'll note the thick belt of mature trees that screen views into the plant site from Wall Hill Lane, which runs along here and wraps around that property. The top picture shows that same receptor from Wall Hill Lane, and you can see that mature tree belt on the edge of the plant site, just behind the property. And again, the bottom picture shows the other property on Wall Hill Lane, just to the south, again with that mature tree belt, providing screening for views into the quarry. So in terms of the application proposals, the proposed extension to the quarry will be undertaken over 5 phases. The first steps will be the site setup and would include the soil stripping, the use of soils to form the screen buns, which are these green bits just here, advanced vegetating planting, which would be just there and up there to screen the properties, the construction of the tunnel underneath Wall Hill Lane, just there, and the formation of the conveyor. Phase 1 will comprise the relocation of the overburden and soils to the west of the site, so removed from here and stored over here, and the gradual extraction from the southern pit. So you can see the arrows showing the gradual extraction now. Phases 2 and 3, you can see the extraction continues in the southern pit, moving in an anti-clockwise direction, with the gradual relocation of the soils and overburden into the stockpile areas over here, and the progressive restoration of the edges of the extraction area, which will eventually form the banks of the lake. So that's just this area just around here. Phases 4 and 5 comprise the completion of the southern pit and the restoration of the edges of the lake, the stripping of soils to form screen buns around the northern and eastern edge up here, and the gradual extraction moving steadily northwards. And the last phase shows the completion of restoration of the southern pit and the advancing extraction and restoration in the northern pit. So this picture provides an idea of what it would actually look like on the ground. So what you can see here is the southern part of the extension area in phase 1. You can see where the screen bund would be on the boundary, which is the green bits here. The bunding around the soil storage areas, the proposed conveyor, and the extraction area here. This shows the southern pit during phase 3, with the location of the soil buns along that eastern boundary and around the 2 receptors, the soil storage area and the location of the southern extraction area there. And this shows phase 5, again, you can see the edge of the southern extraction area just down here, the northern extraction area, the relocated conveyor and soil storage areas, and the screen buns around the edge just there. The extraction would take place over an 8-year period, with a further 2 years to complete the restoration. The groundwater would be lowered to allow the sand to be extracted dry. A sump in the quarry floor would collect the water, and it would be taken by pipeline underneath Walhill Lane to the existing plant site, where it would enter the current water management system here, and then go through a series of lagoons and eventually be discharged out into Loach Brook. The sand would be extracted and transported by conveyor under Walhill Lane to the processing area up here, where it would be processed and exported to the customers. And this is just a picture showing the current quarry. So you can see the conveyor route there. You can see the machines used to extract the sand, the areas of previously restored land up here, and then the current extraction area down here. On restoration, the quarry will be restored largely back to agricultural land, and a large lake would be formed from the southern extraction area. The restoration scheme would also incorporate areas of woodland, hedgerow, reeds beds, grassland and tree planting. You can see from the slide how it would incorporate into the previously consented restoration scheme for the wider quarry site. Proposals include for a new vehicle access on Walhill Lane to allow the quarry, vehicles and plant to cross between the quarry and the extension area without having to travel along stretches of Walhill Lane. So you can see that just here. And there's the conveyor route just there. The proposals also include for the relocation of the existing sand soil banking operations, which are currently situated at Dingle Bank Quarry, over onto the plant site at Bent Farm. This would involve the creation of an area of hard standing, which is this grey bit just here, the erection of additional storage bays down here and over here, and the erection of an acoustic fence with some modification and the extension of the processing plant screen bund just down here. So in terms of the key issues this application raises, the proposal would release 1.1 million tonnes of silica sand. That's a nationally significant mineral and occurs in just a handful of places in the UK. There is a requirement in national and local planning policy to secure at least a 10-year supply of silica sand at each site, and at present Bent Farm Quarry does not have that supply. There's also a policy requirement to maintain a 7-year land bank for aggregate sand, which this would contribute to. The application site is largely located on an allocated site for future silica sand in the Mineral Local Plan, and so the principle of this development has already been accepted. There are likely to be localised impacts on amenity and the environment due to the nature of the extractive operations taking place. However, these can be adequately controlled and mitigated, and on completion of the development, the restored site would provide a net gain for biodiversity. As such, the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions as listed in the report.
Thank you very much, Emma. We will obviously have questions for you later, but now I am required to ask the public speaker for this item. I'm going to call Lewis Williams to address the board. Can I ask Mr. Williams to turn on his microphone and camera, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can you see and hear me?
I can now. You have 3 minutes to speak, after which you may be asked questions. So if you'd like to begin.
Chair and members of the Planning Committee, my name is Lewis Williams and I work in Sibelco's Sustainability Department. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak. Bent Farm Quarry has been operational since 1981 and has supplied silica sand to customers across the UK. Typically, the sand is used in the foundry industry to produce metal castings, although the sand is sold for other industrial applications. While sand deposits are widely distributed across the UK, silica sand is much rarer in its occurrence. For this reason, the NPPF places special importance upon its extraction and best use. This planning application seeks approval to extend Bent Farm Quarry to release 1.1 million tonnes of silica sand, commence sand soil blending and import sand and soils. The extension area is allocated in the adopted minerals local plan as a preferred area for silica sand extraction. The NPPF requires that silica sand quarries should have a land bank of at least 10 years. The site's land bank is well below this, so additional sand will help to increase reserves closer to the required level. The sand soil blending operation will be a relocation of the operation which is now ceased at Dinglebank Quarry. It will produce products used in the construction and maintenance of sports pitches, equestrian facilities and golf courses. The importation of materials will operation, while also making best use of the site's existing drying plant to maintain current supplies to our industrial sand customers. The economic benefits of the proposed development are significant, providing raw materials to support UK industry and maintaining direct and indirect employment locally through the procurement of contractors and services. The NPPF is clear that great weight should be given to the benefits of mineral extraction, including to the economy. The planning application is supported by a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, which concludes that the scheme can be carried out in a sustainable manner. The restoration scheme focuses on the reinstatement of agricultural land. However, through the provision of a lake, planting and other enhancements, calculations indicate that the proposal will result in a 30% net gain to biodiversity. The social benefits of the proposed development are also important, providing raw materials that are necessary in the manufacture of products used in everyday life. A range of mitigation measures are also proposed to protect residential amenity. The case officer's report is comprehensive, indicating that the proposed development complies with the development plan and is consistent with the NPPF. There are no outstanding objections from statutory consultees. It is clear that the significant benefits of the proposal far outweigh any perceived negatives. I respectfully request that you approve this planning application in accordance with the case officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Are there any questions for Mr. Williams? Even with the delay in our system, I'm taking that as a no. So, oh, hold on. Yeah, Councillor Redstone.
Mr. Williams, could you tell me how many crossings there will be per day over Wall Hill Lane from east to west and back again?
There will be a maximum of 2 crossings as a worst case scenario. The plan is that at the beginning of each week, the front end loader would go across Wall Hill Lane and it would remain in the extraction area until the end of the week. So as a worst case, it would be twice a day, but more likely it would be once or twice a week.
Thank you. The other question I had to ask was regarding the effect on what are called the receptors. In other words, the people living in the vicinity of the site. Can you tell me what noise levels will be generated during the actual enabling works?
So to enable mineral extraction, we strip the soils from the site. We do this temporarily, so we'll do this once or twice a year. The noise levels that the receptors will receive will be within accordance with national guidelines, so it will be to a maximum of 70 decibels for a temporary period, but the noise assessment in the IEA was pretty comprehensive and suggests that there won't be any significant impacts to residents.
Thank you. I should say that I am ward councillor for this development.
Thanks for clarifying that, Councillor Redstone, because I wanted to know who to call first, and I was umming and ahhing between you and 1 or 2 other councillors. So I'm now going to ask Councillor Edgar for his question, and then Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Williams, what's the proposed use for the lake after development?
There is no proposed use, so to clarify, we don't actually own the land, we lease it, so it will go back to the landowner's control, but it'll just go back as a lake for nature conservation uses only.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Morton.
Hiya. Existing lighting at the quarry shines very brightly into neighbourhood houses. Would it be possible to redesign this to remove the problem?
Absolutely. I believe on the list of conditions, there was a condition related to lighting. So any additional lighting would have to be submitted, details of which would need to be submitted to the council. But all the existing lighting, we can review that and propose something that doesn't have the impacts that you perceived at the moment.
Yeah, of course. One more. Each time there's been an extension to the site, there's obviously the buildings are quite unsightly. Could you give more consideration into disguising the buildings so they don't look sort of out of place?
Well, I guess in terms of the buildings that are there at the moment, there's sort of a very well-established screening belt that goes around the site. What I can say in terms of is that we're not proposing to change anything, so it won't get any worse. But you know, in terms of what's there at the moment, I kind of consider that it's well screened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Councillor Morton, are you experiencing problems with your camera?
I am, yes. It won't turn on at the moment.
No, that's fine. It's just so I can clarify that is the situation.
Yeah.
The public can't see you, can only hear you. Okay, right. There are no more questions for you, Mr. Lewis. Can I ask you to, sorry, Mr. Williams, can you turn your camera and your microphone off and listen to the rest of the debate in mute? Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Can I now ask, are there any questions for officers relating? Oh,
Okay.
yes. Can you all bear with me a second because I appear to have a power problem.
It's not switched on.
Power problem is resolved. Right. So, are there any questions for officers relating to this application before we go to the debate? Does appear to be a little bit of a delay. So, Councillor Williams, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, question for Officer, a bit of a follow-up to Councillor Morton's question. I just want to know a little bit more whether they are satisfied with the level of screening on the site, and also the concern that was raised about lighting. And I do note that there were not that there's many objections, but there are concerns about the volume of HGV, because that traffic, that seems to be unclear if we go by some of the comments that residents have made. So I just wondered if there was some sort of feedback on each of those, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Would you like me to come back on this?
Yes.
Yep. So in respect of the query about the screening, first of all, you will have noticed from the presentation that soil bunds are proposed to screen most of the receptors around the site. The soil bunds would be between 2 and 3 metres high. Additionally, there'll be advanced planting belts put in, which provides some more screening. The plant site already has a mature planting around it. I'll just share my screen and demonstrate that. Just check you can see that.
Yes, I can.
So that's the closest property to the plant site, which I believe are the ones that were making particular concerns about the visual impacts. As you can see, there's a very large mature of trees. In this corner, there would also be soil bund and a fence to not only provide acoustic properties, would also provide an element of screening. With regards to the lighting, the concern relates to the lighting that's in place on site at the moment. There is a liaison committee that runs, and the purpose of that liaison committee would be to address matters such as those. And I'm sure that Sibelco would have a look at that as part of that and see what amendments they can make to the existing lighting to address those concerns. I'll just come out of that. With respect to the HGV movements, they're actually addressed in my report. Bear with me 1 second. So page 69 of the report discusses the highway impacts. And page 70 looks at specifically at the vehicle movements. The proposal would not increase the overall extraction rates. So the proposed movements associated with extracting sand would remain at 72 HGV movements a day. That's 36 in and out. In terms of new vehicle movements, the new vehicle movements would relate to the sand soil blending operations and the importation of the processed sand to the plant site. And that would generate an additional 40 HGV movements, so that's 20 in and 20 out per day. The highways officer is satisfied that that small additional traffic generated can be accepted on the network. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, before you go, I've got a couple of questions for you. The first one relates to that former point you made regarding to the additional traffic. The facility that is moving to this site from another quarry, is that in the same locus or is it some distance away?
It's from Dingle Bank Quarry, which is just up in Chelford.
So that's that's a little bit away, isn't it? It's in a different road network. So these are going to be additional vehicles on this road network that are currently not using it.
Yes.
Okay. Because I didn't recognise the name of the other quarry, which is why I've asked the question. Also, obviously, when the sand is extracted, I'm not an expert, but on these matters. There is like to be waste product. What happens to that? Is that removed from the site or is it used for backfilling?
Yeah, so it's called tailings. I'll just again share my screen, bear with me. Yeah, so basically the sort of the waste product, the silts and what have you that are produced when they extract the sand, it all gets put through pipeline into this system here. It goes into the lagoons and settles out, and it's basically filtered through that system. The water is passed back out, and then that stays there and eventually is used either to restore the site or restore the plant site as well. So there's nothing generated that's exported off site.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a bit like when sedimentary rocks are created. It's that process, isn't it? You get layers of stuff and it will all be sorted. And finally, and this is just because it amused me, when we talk about highways, there's a reference to a banksman being used, and I don't know what on earth a banksman is. You or Mr. Jones be able to provide us with an answer to that question, please? Mr. Jones, I think you're being delegated. What's a banksman? Mr. Jones with us?
Yes, sorry, Chair. The banksman, yeah. The banksman will be there just to make sure the movements across the road are taking place when there's no oncoming traffic, so it's safe that movements across the road in safety.
So this is actually a human being. It's not some sort of contraption that's employed.
No, it's actually a person there that sat there all the time and make sure that traffic movements are undertaken in safety.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Redstone was obviously reading my mind, because I was about to say there are clearly no other questions, and I'll go to the debate. So if Councillor Redstone has a question.
Yes, it's just basically, have you covered in your conditions that the site would be restored as the development goes along, rather than all at the end? I notice you got sections 27 to 35, but it doesn't actually clarify when that will actually happen. Oh, and that's for Emma Williams.
Yes.
Sorry.
Ms. Williams.
Yeah, so there'll be conditions requiring them to do the development in accordance with the approved plans. The approved plans show the phasing of the work, it shows both the extraction and the rolling restoration. And there's further detail requested under condition 34 as well. So yeah, that ensures that that will be covered by the conditions.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any other questions to Ms. Williams or to Mr. Jones on this application? In that case, I'm going to go back to you, Councillor Redstone, to commence the debate. As the ward councillor.
As the concerns of the parish council have been addressed, I must support this application. This is a very worthwhile employer who provides good jobs and has a good reputation in the area. So I recommend that we approve this application.
Are there any other speakers on this item wishing to add to the debate? I'm not seeing any. I similarly was impressed at the report and the detail held therein. So thank you very much, Ms. Williams, for that. I would be happy to I have Mr. Groves, Councillor Groves wish to speak. Councillor Groves.
I'm sorry to steal your thunder, Chair, but I was just going to say that having listened to the debate, I completely agree with the comments of both Councillor Redstone and indeed yourself, and I would be happy to second. But I'm more than happy to step back if you want.
No, I am one of those chairs who doesn't like proposing and seconding things from the chair when it's not necessary. So thank you very much, Councillor Groves, for stepping in. Are there any other people who wish to speak on this item before I move to the vote? I'm guessing that is a no, so I will now begin calling members' names and asking them whether they are going to vote for, against, or not voting. If they can use that phraseology, it helps with the minute taker. Thank you very much. So Councillor Anthony Critchley.
For.
Councillor Steve Edgar.
For.
Councillor Ashley Farrell. Councillor Farrell. We'll come back to him in a minute. I'm going to go Councillor Peter Groves.
For, Chair.
Councillor David Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Steve Hogben.
For.
Councillor Rob Morton.
For.
Councillor Patrick Redstone.
For.
Councillor Jacqueline Wetherall.
For, Chairman.
Councillor Phil Williams.
For. I'd also like to echo the comments about the detail in the report. I thought it was a remarkably detailed and very informative report.
Thank you very much. I also am voting for, and I'm now going to go back to Councillor Farrell.
For, Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't know what happened there. So that is unanimously voted for. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will now move on to item 7, which is application 62C Charlie. Proposed additional areas associated with the approved road scheme 18/5833C Charlie, referred to as the Middlewich Eastern Bypass, and consisting of ecological and landscape mitigation, and revised Farmers Underpass. Land at Poaching Way, Middlewich, for Mr. Chris Hindle, Cheshire East Council. I'm now going to ask Mr. Adrian Crowther to present this item. Mr. Crowther.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Right, I shall try and share my screen here. When it settles down, finally. Can you just confirm, Chair, that you can see that?
I can, Mr. Crowther.
Thank you for that. Okay, members, so we have this afternoon an application for some modifications to an approved road scheme to the eastern side of Middlewich. So this application accompanied another application which was approved relatively recently for some minor alterations to the scheme as submitted within the site edge red. This application considers areas outside the site edge red. So I'll try and talk you through this particular slide, as it's not a straightforward one to look at. So we have here what I've described as loosely as a pair of bunny ears at the top of the scheme. There's another area in the centre here, and then some more sizable areas in the southern area that all form part of these additional areas to the road scheme. Don't take too much guidance from the red line that runs here. This basically just links these sites together. It is not the line of the road scheme. The actual line of the road scheme, it comes through this area here, but you'll see that better in the slides in a minute. So effectively there are a central area with the 3 big areas of mitigation, so 3 and 4 areas that are subject to this application. Okay, so just an aerial shot just to give you a bit of a taste of the sort of the environment of this area. So you can see it's, for those of you familiar with Middlewich, relatively flat, open farmland, hedgerows and trees within the area. Okay, so running from the north to the south, just note the north arrow on the plan here. So effectively, this is the heading south down the road scheme itself. So the first 2 areas I referred to before, you've got these little pair of bunny ears here. These are tiny additional areas to allow for this sort of pond area, so this sort of water body to actually built properly, with some additional areas around the side just to encompass within the area. So again, a pretty minor change. Secondly, we've got a slither of land here that's required to make sure that the embankment works at this point here, and that there is space along here for a hedgerow line to be planted. The original scheme didn't leave quite enough space, unfortunately, so pretty minor changes in this particular point. Moving swiftly along, the next area is a relocated farmers underpass. The original location was approximately here on the road scheme, but unfortunately, because of the land levels, this farmers underpass didn't work. So effectively, it went too deep under the road scheme. So it's been relocated so it runs at a more sensible, if you like, level. So there's sort of slight deviations to the original scheme, but again, relatively minor in nature. Thirdly, the third slide. So again, remember this is north justified, so you're running south down the road scheme itself. We've got 3 areas of mitigation, which probably are better shown in the next slide. So 1, 2, 3. So this is just an enlarged version of that. So these are areas of effectively all ecological mitigation areas. So they're basically being transferred from elsewhere in the scheme as originally approved into these new areas. So I think the next slide from recollection shows them better in context. So just to give you some idea of sort of location, this is the main Sandbach Road as it exists at the moment. So if you're coming south out of Middlewich, this takes you through the edge of Sandbach. You then have Tetton Lane with some cottages in this location here. You then have the railway line that runs through the middle of Middlewich, that runs along this line here. So this is a largely goods line. I don't think it's used regularly for any sort of normal sort of passenger traffic. So the 3 areas of mitigation effectively lie immediately to the north of that area, and these are the open fields, if you recall from the photograph I showed you right at the beginning. So effectively, there's the railway line. That's one of the areas of mitigation in there. The other two sit within this field here, immediately next to each other. So you can see it's relatively open land at the moment, just sort of pasture land, and the proposal is to change those into areas of mitigation. So moving through the slides. Okay, this just shows a photograph of the cross section through the Farmers Underpass, just to show the difference in levels here. And this is the level across the road. The first cross section AA, the second one is the Farmers Underpass, which is this one at BB, just to show that it's not too deep under the ground. There are lots of drainage issues with this level, with this site, because it's relatively heavy clay, so the water table sits at quite a high level than the land, so there had to be 1 or 2 adjustments made. The photographs now are all fairly long-range shots. I apologise for members. It's very difficult to take pictures of big open fields and these locations, but just to give you an indication of the sort of the terrain we're talking about here. So this is the location of the Farmers Underpass in the middle of this right of way that sort of follows the edge of this field line here, which remains unaffected from the proposals originally approved. Basically, it's just showing where the Farmers Underpass will be in this location here. It effectively sits in the middle of the field. This is a shot from the railway line. So remember, this is the Middlewich line looking north. And again, just to give you an indication of the sort of land we're talking about here, relatively flat, open land, and this is the locations of 2 of the mitigation areas approximately in this position here. This is looking south, so this is effectively, here's your railway line again. So we're looking from completely the other direction now, back towards where the other photograph was showing that there is some slight changes in levels in this area here. But again, these are the areas of mitigation within these sort of zones in this area here. Okay, and again, another one showing very sort of similar sort of matters. The final area is right at the southern end of the scheme, so off Tetton Lane, which is a little sort of short road that comes off the main Sandbach Road. There's an existing access that used to take you back into the old salt works at the bottom of Middlewich, and the intention of this application is to make sure that there is an access provided for the mitigation pond that was not included within the original scheme. So if I take you back quickly through the slides to this area, this is this funny little lozenge of land here. That photograph was taken from approximately this position, looking down here. So this was not included within the site age red of the original application, and needs to be, so it's within the control of the builders effectively to make sure that they retain access to this mitigation pond in this area here to show. So effectively, members, there are 3 minor changes to the scheme. This one at the southern end here, 2 at the northern end. The main elements of the scheme, if you like, and the reason it's before you today, because of the land take of these areas, is to create 3 areas of mitigation. They're all fairly substantial pieces of land, but physically they will not change substantially. Their appearance would remain largely similar. There are some additional ponds being placed in these areas, and there are some ecological works that are being carried out in there in terms of creating rich grassland, those sorts of works, but they will not change substantially in their visual appearance. So, Chair, I think with just 2 things I need to confirm in terms of the report. Firstly, there's reference in the report with regard to trees. We didn't have the comments from the tree officer. I can confirm that there are no impacts on trees as proposed to this development. There are no additional trees being removed, and there will be no impact on any of the existing trees. All the works are well out of any sort of root protection areas that go with that. And I think, Chair, unless I'm missing something, I think that's pretty much it. So happy to take any questions in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crowther. Before we go to questions, I'm now going to ask Neil Grundy, the project sponsor from Cheshire East Highways, to address the meeting. Mr. Grundy, can you please turn on your camera and your microphone?
Sorry, Chair, can we just ask Adrian not to share?
Oh, sorry.
I'm just closing down.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Apologies, my camera is not working, so
That's
hopefully
fine.
you can hear me on audio.
Right, so you have 3 minutes to address the meeting, and there may be questions afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the summary and report given by the case officer has adequately and correctly appraised members of the facts and considerations relating to the application. I don't necessarily want to repeat anything that's already been stated, but I just do want to stress the context in which the council has made this new application. The Middlewich Eastern Bypass has had a planning permission now since July 2019, but since that time, an opportunity to take a different approach to the mitigation for great crested newts has become possible. This, together with the need for cost savings on the scheme, has warranted some engineering and environmental changes. The scheme changes, whilst they don't affect the route in the form of the bypass, have been and required for the original consent. This new application does cover areas outside of the original red line boundary. The decisions that we've taken to make the changes have been taken based upon cost, risk and deliverability considerations for the scheme, with costs affecting deliverability and delays due to deliverability issues causing further increases in estimates due to construction of inflation. This is a potential threat to any scheme, and Middlewich Eastern Bypass is not excluded for that, and it's an ever-present challenge that we have to face in delivering schemes of this size and nature. Whilst the area within the red line boundary of the original consent and this new application taken together has increased, the actual overall footprint of the scheme in the land take terms has actually been reduced from the original consent, and please, this is a key point to note. It's been clearly articulated previously that the scheme is a key piece of infrastructure for the council, enabling development of the local plan site at midpoint 18. It relieves both chronic and acute congestion in Middlewich and provides a wider benefit to the region through improved transport links. The consented scheme and all the land within the red line boundary is safeguarded within the emerging site allocations development policies document. And it's in recognition of the importance of the scheme. A delay in implementation of the scheme is to the detriment of all the benefits that the scheme will bring, and the council and its agents will continue to use all our efforts and opportunities to minimise the risk of delays. And just finally, I just ask you to, if you're able to support and approve this application today, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Grundy, are there any questions to Mr. Grundy? I'm taking that as a no, so thank you very much, Mr. Grundy. Are there any questions to Mr. Crowder regarding his presentation or the application itself? I'm taking that as a no. Councillor Redstone.
I wonder if you could just clarify something for me. I'm looking at the proposed badger set location on your drawing BRJ 10612H 100-025. This appears to go over the Trenton Mersey Canal. Does that mean that the canal is in a tunnel?
Mr. Crowder?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the relevant plan. Just bear with me. So we're looking at the general arrangement drawing sheet 404. Is that correct, Councillor Redstone?
Just to see what you're talking. Oh yeah, it's Jacob's number BRJ 10612.
Yep. Okay. So
you see the hatched area at the upper left-hand side of the plan.
Yes.
You see that sails over almost to the other side of the Trenton Mersey Canal.
Yeah, I don't think the hatched area is. If you look at the key on the right hand side, the hatched area is the material storage area, contractors compound and working area.
But that, what I'm asking is, does it go over the canal?
It does. I'll accept that the tail end of that does appear to sail over the canal. I think that is an omission. I don't think there is no intention for that to go over the canal area.
Fair enough.
Quite that out. The canal has a crossing, which you can say, which shows the road crossing. But other than that, the canal remains as an open canal. That is not affected.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, if there are no further questions for, okay, Councillor Edgar.
Sorry, I preempted your opening the debate.
If you'd like to start the debate, given that there are no further questions in the chat room, so I'm indicate there's no further questions for Mr. Crowther. So I then intend to open the debate. I'm conscious that Councillor Hunter is not here today, and I'm afraid my geography of the remaining members of the board and where your ward boundaries begin and end is not sufficient to tell me who is nearest. So as Councillor Edgar has offered to open the debate, I intend to call him to open the debate.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, having listened to the presentation and looked at the report, I don't think there's anything to object to be honest. I'd like to move to approve.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak on this item, or do I have a seconder for that proposition? Okay, I am now going to call Councillor Hogben, because in my box he appeared first.
I have to apologise to Councillor Groves because I thought he pipped me to the post. All I want to do is...
I apologise to Councillor Groves as well, because it was yours that appeared first and I then saw his and I wasn't sure whether or not I'd missed that the first time. So,
well, I suppose I am marginally in Crewe South, marginally closer to Middlewich than than Councillor Groves in distant Nantwich. So I'm happy to second the proposition moved by Councillor Edgar.
Okay, I am assuming, Councillor Groves, that you have nothing further to add to what Councillor Hogben has just said. You weren't going to add anything to the debate, were you?
No, I wasn't. I agree with the comments that have been made by both Councillor Edgar and Councillor Hogben, Chair.
In that case, I intend to go to the vote, and I will be calling councillors in the alphabetical order. If you can indicate whether you are for, against, or not voting using that phraseology. So, Councillor Anthony Critchley.
For.
Thank you very much. Councillor Steve Edgar.
For.
Councillor Ashley Farrell.
For.
Councillor Peter Groves.
For.
Councillor David Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Steve Hogben. Councillor Rob Morton.
For.
Councillor Patrick Redstone.
For.
Councillor Jacqueline Weatherall.
For.
Councillor Phil Williams.
For.
And I am also for. That's fine. Okay, that item is approved. Thank you very much. We'll now move to item 8-20, item 8, which is application 20/80860C Charlie. The proposed development for a single industrial unit, use classes B1, B2 and B8, totaling 123,000 square feet, which is incorporated warehouse space and offices on the first and second floors. The development will also incorporate car parking provision, a complementary scheme of soft landscaping, pedestrian access paths, cycle stores, bin store, self-contained service yard. Plot 63, brackets phase 2, close brackets, Poaching Way, Middlewich, for just said care of the agent. I'm now going to ask Mr. Crowther to present this item, I understand.
Thank you, Chair. So just get this one open. Okay. Can you just confirm, you can see that, please, Chair?
Yes, I can see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, members. So, as read in the description, the proposal this afternoon is for a single industrial unit to form part of the Middlewich Industrial Estate. So, just to sort of set the context in an aerial photograph. So, these are existing industrial premises on the eastern side of Middlewich. My previous report relates to the Middlewich Eastern Bypass, which runs around this area here. So that goes to the eastern side of all of these units. So the site in question for this development is effectively this sort of lozenge of land here that I'm outlining with the cursor now. So again, we've got the railway line that runs through the centre area of Middlewich. You then have the industrial estate on the western side of the railway line. And that's obviously the main Booth lane that takes you through to the lights that led us the centre in the centre of Middlewich. So moving swiftly along. Site edge red. So again, this area here at the top of the shot is this sort of shape of land. Site edge blue, which we'll come on to in a second, is the remainder of the land within the ownership of this particular developer. And this is all an area that has got a full planning approval for a number of industrial units. So you can see the context of that. This is Poaching Way, just to set some context. So this is the existing estate road effectively that runs through into Middlewich and serves all these existing industrial units. So again, railway line here, and then you've got the other side of Middlewich up towards Booth Lane on that side. Just to set some context, this is LPS 44, which is the allocation within the local plan. Again, that allocates the whole of this area for industrial commercial development. So you can see it's a sizable area, and the site in question, again, just to point it out, sits in this location here on sort of the northwestern side of the site. Again, just to show the general layout of the application, I think you've got a better, more detailed thing of this in your packs. But just to sort of show the layout again, north justified, so north, south, Poaching Way. You have Sanderson Brook, which sits in quite a deep valley sort of feature that flows immediately adjacent to the site, and you can see here the contours. So you've got quite a significant change in level here, but this area in question, you'll see the photographs in a second, is relatively level in form and just open land at the moment. And again, you have the railway line that runs along the western side of the site. So just to show the sort of general layout, the white area on this plan is the general form of the actual industrial unit. You can see it's a very similar form to other ones in this particular area. You then have the gunmetal colour here, which is the entrance area, and the sort of parking provision at this end. So this is the sort of general sort of visitor parking and employee parking. You then come through some form of a gate structure into the site. You have a series of lorry bays that are these sort of long, sort of thin sort of shuts here. The actual loading bays to the building itself. You then come around the corner, turning area, another series of loading bays, and then an area of mitigation and attenuation pond in the most northerly sort of part of the site. And these areas in green on here are for additional landscaping. So you can see the site is quite tight to the railway, but it sort of follows the natural sort of form of the site and shape of the site. So just to set it in context, so if you can just about make out, there's a red line there. So everything on this side has already been approved. So these are the sort of phase 1, phase 2, as you can see on the drawing. These are earlier phases that have been approved, so this would be the sort of third phase on this side of Poaching Way. And again, the railway line runs along this line at this position. Elevations, typical large industrial units, graded in colour to sort of reduce its overall form. But again, it's a form and functional building. It's designed to be exactly that. Loading bays, and obviously this is the one that faces onto Poaching Way. You do have the office unit in the corner here. You can see that through 2 stories on the corner of the building, and that's what you would see when you enter the site. So that's sort of the prominent, if you like, part of the building you would see from the public highway. Just a general form of the building, I won't dwell on that. And these are the first and second floor plans again, is this glazed area here. So if you come into the site, if you remember the layout plan, you'll look in this direction here and you'll see this sort of glazed area on the corner, which is the office that gives the building a bit more presence and a bit more interest in architectural terms. This is a site looking across the site itself. So you can see in the distance there, you can see the other side of Middlewich on the other side of the railway, but this is the sort of general form of this area. You can just see the light stanchions here. There's another photograph in a second. This is on the edge of Poaching Way. So you can see it's a relatively open, pretty flat site. Again, just looking back towards Middlewich itself, looking back towards Brooks Lane, you can see there, and here you can see some various pipelines, and the railway runs approximately in this position here. Sorry, this photograph's rather dark, shows pretty much the same thing, to be fair. This is looking south, down towards Cledford Lane, again just showing the general form of the site. I think there's one further photograph just showing Poaching Way itself. So this is the main sort of access road, and the access into the site would be provided directly off Poaching Way itself. And again, just showing the sort of context between the two. You can see it's a relatively open, flat site. And I think, members, that's it for the slideshow. Happy to take any questions in due course. Thank you very much.
I don't have any public speakers registered for this item, so any questions for Mr. Crowther? Right, I think I've allowed enough time now for.
Sorry, Chairman, does anyone stop sharing?
Yes, yeah, I think you can stop sharing, Mr. Crowther. Thank you very much. In that case, who would like to open the debate on this application, given that there are no questions to Mr. Crowther? Indication in the chat box, please, so I know who to call. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you. As per the previous one, it's self-explanatory. It's in an area of industrial development, and I'll move to approve again, please.
Thank you very much. And this time I did see Councillor Hogburn first. So, Councillor Hogburn, would you like to speak?
Yeah, it's just to formally second the proposition just moved by Councillor Edgar. Again, thanks.
If I get no further indication of anybody wishing to speak on this item, I tend to put that matter to the vote. Can't see anybody, so I intend to do what I've done previously, which is to call councillors in alphabetical order, and if they can please use the term for, against, or not voting. So, Councillor Anthony Critchley.
For.
Councillor Steve Edgar.
For.
Councillor Ashley Farrell.
For.
Councillor Peter Groves.
For.
Councillor David Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Steve Hogburn.
For.
Councillor Rob Morton. Councillor Morton. Okay, we'll go back to Councillor Morton. Councillor Redstone.
For.
Councillor Jackie Weatherall.
For.
Councillor Phil Williams.
For.
I'm also for. Councillor Morton. Councillor Morton, you are on mute. Could you unmute if you wish to speak to us, please? Councillor Morton, if you don't respond, I'm going to have you recorded as not voting on this item. Sorry to members of the public watching this meeting and to members of the board. We are just trying to make contact with Councillor Morton. Okay. I'm going to take an executive decision that Councillor Morton did not vote on that item and move to the next item on the agenda. we're now going to address item 9, which is the government's white paper planning for the future, and this council's response to that initial consultation. I'm going to ask Tom Evans to present this item. Mr. Evans.
Good afternoon, members. Hello. Yes, this item is on the Planning for the Future white paper, the government's proposed planning reforms. There's not a decision as such to take here, other than to note the draft response that we're currently preparing at the moment. It's important to say that it is a draft response, and we've brought it to your committee to take some feedback and some soundings, and we expect to amend the response as we go forward to consultation submission, which is at the end of October on the 29th. So I'll share my screen and work through a short presentation on the content of the white paper. Bear with me a second.
I can see that.
Okay. Lovely. So it's a quite an extensive paper, and it's a paper that proposes some quite radical reform. It's going to require primary legislation to implement a whole raft of changes to the planning system. This isn't a tweaking of the planning system. It isn't a small revision here and there. It's a root and branch overhaul of the system, and it's presented in it's constructed in 3 pillars. So we've got a pillar which addresses planning for development, a pillar which addresses planning for beautiful and sustainable places, and a pillar for infrastructure and connected places. And those pillars are unpacked into 5 separate proposals. I've got them on the screen there, but it's looking at essentially how to make the planning system more streamlined, if you like, quicker in terms of its responsiveness to getting applications through the system and to delivering the houses that the government set out we need. There's also some proposals around digitising planning more in a more joined up way across the country, and there's a lot of focus on design elements, so that's quite an important part of the proposals. But there's also a lot of detail which is not really fleshed out in a way that we can make an informed response at this stage. So it's very much an ideas paper, and lacking in some of the detail that helps us make an informed response. And I think without the detail, there is some risk to local authorities on a number of matters, which I'll come on to next. So primarily, the approach around local plans is not entirely dissimilar from how we approach things now, but it's a bit more focused on what's been termed zoning. So there's 3 proposed areas that will be designated in a local plan instead of the multiple types of allocations. We'd have a growth area, a renewal area or zone, and a protection area. So if you want to think of how that translates to our current local plan, you'd be putting your site allocations into your growth areas, and the renewal areas perhaps would be the existing developed areas, the existing settlements, and the protection areas might be the countryside and greenbelt and the natural environment that we have allocated around the authority. There is a really important, quite radical approach been put forward that the local plan process would be started and completed in 30 months. And this is very different to where we're at now. It takes years to prepare a local plan. And the reason it takes years is because of the scrutiny and the evidence that underpins the process, not least the delving into how many homes we need in any given authority and how much employment land should go along to match the authority's ambitions. So the proposals are to require less evidence and remove the tests of soundness, remove the duty to cooperate, and reduce the burden on things such as sustainability appraisal and environmental assessment. Really importantly, the government are proposing to allocate housing numbers to local authorities from Whitehall. So that will mean that we no longer establish our own housing growth scenarios, which we deem to be appropriate, but that would genuinely reduce the amount of time it takes to prepare to produce a local plan. However, obviously there is there's a big trade-off there in terms of local accountability and just the input into how that number is agreed on. So there's a lot to taken about how local plans might change, and the whole purpose of this is to create a process that speeds up the system. And I think one of the things we're really concerned about is the trade-off, really. Are we still going to have an appropriate level of community engagement in the local plan process? Will there be sufficient oversight and democratic control over the process? Will we find that there is a lot of backroom lobbying goes on around the housing numbers? What is the approach to housing numbers? We've not got the criteria that will give us some confidence that it could be distributed fairly, although the paper does set out that constraints will be taken into account. So if you've got a lot of greenbelt, perhaps you'll have a reduced number, but what happens to that surplus number that you can't accommodate? So there's a lot of questions unanswered in the approach to local plans, but essentially it is to reduce the process down to a shorter time frame and make things a bit more streamlined, really. So there's also matters on capturing planning gain for infrastructure. This is quite important. Another area where we perhaps not got the detail we need to inform this. Currently, we set out our infrastructure that we need in the authority, and we set out an infrastructure delivery plan, and it's funded through the Community Infrastructure Levy and Section 106 agreements. But those two mechanisms are proposed to be incorporated into one infrastructure levy. And whilst that might offer some benefits, some streamlining, if you like, we do not know what the extent of planning gain that there will be that is captured. So will it be more or less, essentially? And what we really want to make sure is that the planning process does capture the right amount of input from the development industry, the value of land that's uplifted by planning consent, and that is fed back into the local authority's ability to deliver highways, schools, green space, that list of things that we need. One of the big concerns around this is affordable housing. Section 106 is the primary route through which we secure affordable housing, and there might be there's an unknown element, I suppose, about how an infrastructure levy would deal with that. We see some assertions on neighbourhood plans, and there's not a lot of detail in there about the role for neighbourhood plans, but they are mentioned, and is couched in a way which suggests that they may well be retained. It sounds as if they will be. We're not quite sure on what basis. There's a focus on design codes in this proposal, which is a set of rules, a set of standards. So moving away from policy towards design standards and almost a criteria-based approach. And it seems as if neighbourhood plans have been proposed to have a bit of a closer role in that on a local basis. And whilst the design elements of the sort of the emphasis on design is welcome, I think it's fair to say that design is not just about beauty, which is how it's couched in this paper. It is about where different things go. You know, how does sustainable design feed out in urban design? It's not just about how something looks, it's how the separate pieces of the puzzle fit together and making sure they talk to each other. So there's a lot of emphasis on beauty and the physical aspect of design, but I think that it's fair to say that design is a lot more complicated than just how things look. On the digital services element, there's a concern I think that we have about how you link up planning to a national agenda, if you like. I think we all have made great advances across the planning system and across local authorities in publishing our material online, using digital maps, making our processes more digital orientated. We use it all the time through our consultation portals for both applications and local plan making, and it is something which authorities up and down the country do, but it is also very different in each authority. So if there's a proposal to align and connect authorities into a single approach on a mapped basis, there's a lot of knock-on implications to that for an authority about how we fund the IT infrastructure that under a lot of unknowns about that. Some assurances in the white paper that the system will be fully resourced, but without work details, I think it's a bit hard for us to back the proposals in full without more information. There's also some gaps as well, and I think that is perhaps a little bit unfair to point to the gaps because this is a white paper, it is a paper about the big picture and the ideas, But there are gaps about how we'll deal with minerals and things like retail. Are they going to fall into just the zoned categories and be under the category of sort of permitted development? So we've got a few key messages that we want to feed back to government. We do provide some detailed answers in the appendix that is in the report. And like I say, that will be subject to change once we've heard your comments and taken feedback from the portfolio holder. Messages we want to get across is that this is a very significant change for local authorities, and it will require a change in how we allocate resources to plan making and development management. One of the key things about the proposals is the move in the local plan process to grant outline planning permission once a local plan is consented to those sites that are in the plan. And that has a real implication for the amount of information, the amount of time, negotiation that we have to spend with developers. And it means a very different approach to local plan making, not only on that side of things, but also explaining that to our communities. You know, if we're going to prepare these new plans with consented sites in 30 months, we need a different and more efficient approach to engaging with our communities to make sure they know what we're doing. So there's a big resource implication. We must emphasise that government must ensure that we get sufficient funding to work within this new process. And the detail is so important on the next version of this paper. It's very, very difficult for us to understand what the benefits or the losses might be in terms of infrastructure in particular, or the housing figures that we might have, without some worked examples of the mechanics of the algorithm or whatever it might be that gives us these numbers. So we definitely need more detail to make an informed response in the next stage. Another key concern is the transparency. So by moving away from a policy-based planning system, which is thoroughly built on planning judgment and the exercise of decision making through bodies such as yourselves, through individual members and committees, we have a system which relies on a interpretation of guidance, and it is designed in that way to allow flexibility to respond to difficult, awkward sites that take time to get through the process and make nuanced decisions based on local circumstances. Without that sort of approach and moving towards a more of perhaps a tick box type of exercise against development standards and permitted development, we're losing something which it's not obvious will be replaced. So we're losing the transparency, we're losing the oversight of local input, and it's not very obvious from what's proposed how that will be made good. So those are the key messages that we want to get across. It is difficult to give detailed answers, like I said, but we've set out our concerns, and the consultation closes in around about 2 weeks' time. So we're keen to hear any input from members, and we'll take that on board as we move forward. I'd also like to stress that it is an open consultation. Members will be representing different elements of their communities. You know, you are free as individuals to participate in this consultation, and it's worth saying that for your local communities, the town and parish councils out there, I know that a lot of them are responding individually too. So it's just a flag that we've got 2 weeks across the piece to respond to this, and it is worth a read, and it's worth feeding back some comments and getting that into government. And that's all I have to say for now, unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much. I would like to point out, in addition to you being a representation of your communities, you can do so as part of political or group, aligned groups, or as an individual. So you will have, if you feel a particular point you've raised today has not been incorporated into anything we've passed forward to Mr. Evans, then feel free to do that. Or if you feel you have strongly about it, you have other views, to say that. Now, I understand I'm getting messages that there are sound problems. Can I just check technically that we're still A, being heard by the members of the public, and B, that there are no issues with regard to, okay, the person's come back and said it's okay now. I suspect it's got something to do with chocolate biscuits.
I think for you, Chairman, it was Tom wasn't on mute, so it might have been feedback from him, so I've muted him, and it seems to clear it up.
Thank you. He's nodding, so I think he's recognising his role. So, right, do we have any questions for Mr. Evans before we go to debate? This is a very thorny topic that we're going to be asked to talk about? I was obviously the only person who had steam coming out of my ears when I was reading this report. Okay, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. I've got, well, not quite a few, but a handful of things to talk about. But I think because we're only commenting, they're not really questions for Tom. The only thing I would ask on question, only out of curiosity, really. Question 1, the 3 words associated with the planning system. One of them has been a response has been positive, which struck me as an odd word to use. So I was just wondering what the basis for that was.
Just unmute myself. I suppose I'm a town planner. I'm a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. I think planning is a positive process. It's a positive regime that we go through to manage development. So, you know, there's no 3 right words for here. I suppose there's a lot of alternative assemblages of 3 words that I could use, but I went for the most pragmatic one. So, you know, I think we will definitely have a look at that and come up with something which represents the view, and whether that retains positive, I'm not sure.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm aware, Councillor Jeffrey, that you wish to speak. I'm going to ask Councillor Williams to bring his question in now if you haven't got any more questions for Mr. Evans, and then we'll. I've got a couple of speakers in my inbox. Is that okay? Right. Okay.
Yes, Chair. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much. Councillor Williams, your question.
Okay. Firstly, Tom, I think it's given the amount of information that we've got to deal with. I think the response is pretty comprehensive. Given the current level of knowledge. But my question is about, I know it's a bit of a strange one really, but when do we, some of the not sures, I always feel a little bit jumpy when I see a not sure, but I understand why there's not sure answers, because we haven't got as much detail on some of these issues as we might like at the moment. But when do you envisage being able to be in a position to sort of maybe change from a not sure to a yes or a no response on some of those? At what point in the process will some of these things become clearer in your view?
I would hope that the next version of the proposals that the government release will have some ability to give a more certain answer, and the not sures are included because simply it doesn't feel right to commit to a yes or no without additional information. I recognise that's slightly a cop-out, but I think it's fair comment to say that it's very difficult to support the question by a yes answer in a lot of cases, perhaps more than I've written down there, without the information to understand what the impact is on our authority in particular, but local authorities in general. So in the next paper, I'd hope we'll get some more information.
Okay. Is there anything that we can do to sort of try and press for more information on some of these things, or further clarification? Anything that we can do as a local authority or as a planning committee to help expedite that?
I think we can emphasise that further in the questions, that we need more detail. I hope it's a theme that comes through and we can look at that and make sure that it does come through, but definitely a request for more information. I suppose what we could do, so we don't support any of it until you provide more information. That might be an approach that we'd like to take.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I intend to go to the debate, and I'm going to allow Councillor Jeffrey to start and then go to Councillor Hogben. So Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I've got a number of points. Some relate to our responses, some are general comments, some are relating to the white paper itself. So already spoken about the positive thing on question 1. Question 5 is another one about whether local plans should be simplified. On the 3 words, one of the ones I would suggest to use is antiquated. I think it is. I think the government's probably right on it that it needs updating. On the question 5, my concern would be that it would seem to me, from my interpretation of the white paper, is that they want to take a lot of information out of the local plans but I get the impression that they want to produce it as kind of local guides or design codes in somewhere in the white paper. I think I saw that it could be as far down as kind of street level, which I would imagine be incorporated into local plans or something. So really, whether I'm kind of accepting of the 3 zones would depend on that kind of granularity, because it would be quite easy to surround a town such as Wilmslow in a growth area, but we've got the constraint. So it depends how they do that balance of granularity of the zones and the protected areas. Kind of linking on to that, there seems to be a focus on targeting development where there's affordability issues, which to me, obviously, because Wilmslow is my ward, it's not very affordable, but it is if you reflect it on earnings for the people who live there, as we did in the last local plan. When you base it on the mean income of the people who live here, then the house prices are quite affordable. If you base it on average incomes, it's not affordable. So I would be a bit nervous about losing some of the character of the area by using a broad brush approach. Similarly with, well, not similarly, but with question 9C about new settlements, I kind of got the impression that the government would want to take over new settlements such as the Hampton Growth Village and Southern Growth Villages, I assume. So I'm just nervous about losing control over that, because I think we answered yes to something along those lines, which worried me a bit. So back to what I was saying earlier, that it seems to be moving quite a lot of the detail out of local plans, but moving them into design codes. And if they're produced locally, then we've still got the same amount of effort to do. It's just not in the local plan. Question 21 was about priorities, I think. When new development happens in your area, what is a priority? So we've said more or better infrastructure, design of new buildings and green space, which I agree with. But I was just surprised that affordable housing wasn't one of them, because it was one of the prompts that they gave us in the brackets. So given that we've got this new affordable housing infrastructure framework thing that we're going forward with, I would have thought affordable housing would be a priority. So a couple of general things was the digitised approach. I think that's a really good idea, in that I imagine it would be kind of like an interactive map with different layers on, showing the different information, so it's there in one place, and that should allow us to produce information and data on a live basis, so we don't have a step change every 15 years and have to generate data. It can be produced going through the on the kind of rolling basis. So that's good. It was nice to see in the white paper about beefing up of enforcement and the higher emphasis on that. So I like to see that. And the only other comment I would make was acknowledging that this is a draft just for us to look at, but it could do with a bit of a spell check and a proofread. But yeah, those are my comments.
Councillor Jeffrey, are you suggesting that the document itself needs, or are you saying Mr. Evans needs to do some spell checking?
Yeah, our response.
All right, that's fine, because I wouldn't be surprised if there were errors in the document itself.
I'm sure.
Okay, right. I now have Councillors Hogben, Groves and Farrell in that order. Councillor Hogben.
Yeah, when you mentioned 3 words, I thought maybe you were asking for 3 words to describe the proposals. And I could think of some triplets, if you like. Act in haste, repent at leisure, poorly thought out. Then I'm just looking at section 5.3 of the report, mentions refocusing public engagement away from the planning application stage to the development of the local plan. three words that describe that: less community involvement. Because if there's one area of council business that attracts a lot of interest, apart from the bins and the roads and the potholes, it's planning. But let's not allow the community to comment on planning applications, because it'll all be decided anyway without their involvement, and there'll be 99% delegation to officers. And the same sort of thing for speeding up the development process by ensuring that land allocated as a growth zone will benefit from outline planning permission, just like that. And any reserved matters will be dealt with primarily by professionals, no planning or not planning committees. I'm not sure how that differs from now, because we have our officers do a lot of the detailed work, but in the end, you know, it is about democratic accountability at the moment. And well, I view this as an attack on democratic accountability, frankly. 535. Speed up the production of local plans through reducing and removing the evidential burden. I mean, that is offensive. That's one word I could use, but I don't want to rant too long because people will just get tired of it. I mean, that seems to be a bit of a habit of this present government of ignoring advice or evidence when it suits the government. But I think it's important that we have evidence to support our contentions. But this is also a move to centralise. The big message to me is to reduce local involvement and reduce proper accountability. Because you can say, well, you have your input every few years into a local plan, so concentrate on that, but don't bother with the details of planning approvals or planning applications. You know, we'll leave that to the experts. Leave it all to the experts. A bit unusual coming from this government is so sceptical of some experts. So I could go on. I suppose if I had one question or thing that I think needs to be clarified, it's are we free to feed back our comments or criticisms or otherwise direct to David Malcolm and Councillor Fox for consideration for inclusion in the response from the council? Or is it more appropriate that we do that as political groups or individuals or whatever?
In answer to that question, you as a councillor have every right, as an individual councillor, to make representations to the portfolio holder or to Mr. Malcolm as the lead officer. It's probably best if you make them to Tom, because he is the person who's being bringing things together. And similarly, Mr. Malcolm's going to clarify that in a moment. But similarly, as a member of a political party, you can make comments, but you can also make comments as an individual directly to the Secretary of State's consultation. And I would urge anybody that's got any views on it that they want to write strongly, because if we put everybody's views even from the boards today, we'll probably end up with a very long document. But there might be something particular that you or any other councillor who feels strongly about that they want to make comments on. I've got some comments, and I probably will be doing. I think I will be doing that because I know that some of the views I hold are not necessarily by other members of my group or perhaps by this board. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, I'll be happy when it comes to it to just to note it and make my personal input, because I could rant for quite some time. You mentioned steam coming out of ears. I would be fascinated to hear what you've got to say, Chair, but that's up to you.
Okay, I will make a few comments later, but I have got other speakers in the inbox, which is Councillors Groves and Councillor Farrow. But before I go, I'm going to ask Mr. Malcolm to come back to clarify the point that was raised by Councillor Hogben.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to make the point. I mean, yes, the members have been asked to note the report, but as you know, I've also sent an email to all members to feedback comments to myself and Councillor Fox as portfolio holder. I think Councillor Garland just clarified really that I think the point here is that even within the planning service, we'll all have slightly different views, and obviously depending upon your political persuasions, you'll have, I guess, slightly different views depending upon your thoughts on it. So it was really just to pull together comments so that if there's something that we have missed, or something that we felt actually, yes, that's something that we want to sort of highlight, then yeah, we can do so. So what you've got here is a draft. I mean, we've already made some slight changes, but from other officers. I need to sort of have an overview of it myself just beforehand with Councillor Fox. So I think, as has been said, you know, by all means, feed comments through to myself or Tom. I mean, we can soon clarify, and then we'll produce something that effectively will go back from the council. But effectively, that doesn't stop. I think I'm aware that I think some of the political groups themselves are sending comments directly as a group, which is again fine. So this was really just to get, you know, your strategic planning board. This is a significant potentially planning reform, so it's appropriate to bring this before members to at least highlight it and draw attention to it, and then obviously for us to comment upon that. And as for where we go after this, I mean, you know, as Tom's alluded to, we don't really know, to be honest. But I've been involved in a number of discussions with other authorities, etc. And I think there is some commonality about some of the lack of detail as well. So that will come through. But yeah, just to clarify, you know, by all means, I mean, I'm making notes as I go anyway of what's being said here. Things like the question, you know, the question 1 about your 3 points, which do you pick out? I mean, that's quite a difficult one because we will all have a different view on it. We'll just have to settle on something that we think reflects fairly sort of a generic response. But I think in all other respects, we'll do a sort of hopefully comments that members will appreciate, even though you may have a slightly different emphasis on them. So I hope that's sort of helpful to. So, you know, I suppose now's the opportunity if you want to, and you don't want to sort of send something through, by all means speak up now, and we'll take notes of it. I've got a meeting with Councillor Fox tomorrow anyway, so we'll start to sort of bring some of this together. But I mean, we've also said, you know, by the end of the week, any comment to me direct, that's fine as well. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Groves and then Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. There are many concerns this white paper raises. However, the Town and Country Planning Association commented that far from democratising planning, the white paper positively reduces democratic accountability and the individual rights of the citizen to participate. And I have to say that that seriously concerns me. I have been party to 2 robust responses being sent to the Secretary of State so far, and I would encourage all borough, town and parish councils and councillors as individuals, and also individual residents, to comment on the paper and forward their views by the 29th of October. And I think it's really important, because if you look at what's being proposed and the algorithm, it is the shires that are going to bear the brunt of development in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farrell.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, just on the obviously the response, obviously we haven't got as much detail as we'd like, but on the starting from, you know, the question 1, the how you associate with the planning system, I think positive is one of those. You know, I think as a strategic planning board, we have a positive effect on you know, our borough. You know, we might not always agree on things, and we might be drawing out debates sometimes, but I'd hope that once the applications have come through the planning board, or Northern or Southern, then they go out better than they came in, with ideas from, you know, that local knowledge that goes beyond maybe technical specification, is essential part of the planning process. And it's kind of this white paper seems to me, you know, from the Localism Act in 2011, where, you know, the government devolved you know, powers to local authorities to, you know, input their local ideas and, you know, stuff like that. It's now wrestling that back away from us without any of the benefits that brought to us. So Yeah, it's big concerns really, but I think that the draft responses here cover most of the things without the full details of the proposal. But yeah, unfortunately, I think I've got a sneaking suspicion that all this may just be academic in the end anyway. So, you know, here's what it is.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
I would very much echo the comments that Councillor Fowles just made. I did, in the question I made to Tom Evans earlier, I did sort of focus on the not sure aspect, but I'd like to sort of balance that out by saying that many of the responses in the draft so far, I'm really pleased to see. I'm very pleased to see that there is an emphasis coming from it on local voices and local democracy. I'm also pleased to see that there's a concern about how we communicate with groups maybe marginalised or have less access to digital technology, and I'm pleased to see that that's been represented. I'm also very pleased to see that there's a question about the approach to gypsies, travellers and travelling show people as well, and I think that there's a lot in the responses that we have before us, which I find encouraging. I wish I could be more encouraged that it would actually get a hearing when it does go to central government, because I think I do share Councillor Fowles' view that they will ride roughshod over us, I'm afraid. Sorry to be party political, but that's how I feel. It is interesting that there is a view that appears to be cross-party on this one. And I do think, yes, we can be quite slow-moving and cumbersome as a board, but one of the things I think is significant about this board is that there is significant and agreement across party, because we all want to represent our communities and get what's best for the people of Cheshire East. And I would very much be aggrieved if that right, if you like, that privilege, whatever you want to call it, is removed from us. And I think that would be a very sad day.
Okay, any other speakers? I have been asked for my observations, and I can assure members that the ink expended on my agenda in regard to this item was 10 times and 10 times what I spent looking and making notes on the items that we discussed. Like Mr. Evans, I am also a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute, which is something that I hold dearly, and it took a long time to get it, and so I don't, even though I don't practice as professionally, I still maintain my membership, and obviously will be subject to any CPD. The RTPI will be making very strong comments to government on this. I also, given my employment situation, I'm aware that this particular white paper has raised significant concerns amongst the government's own benches, and a revolt against the current scheme is probably liable if it were to be put to the vote in its current form. My concerns, however, are probably about three key issues. One of them is the levelling up agenda. I was at a meeting last week where with a social landlord who is trying to invest significant money in the north, working with government agencies to do so. And his concern is that this proposal and the algorithm proposed to calculate housing numbers will result in significant additional building in the southeast corner of the country, and that will have a significant impact on the ability of house builders, both social and otherwise, to provide the housing that is needed to generate the re-engagement of the north of England, and it will be a detrimental step. So I feel that we need to, as a district within the northern area, incorporate within our response concern about the impact this will have on the ability to achieve the levelling up agenda the government is heralding. I also feel there is insufficient protection. We have these protected zones, but for heritage assets. If we visit foreign countries, we all take a trip to the local Roman, medieval, later Jacobean, except we wouldn't have Jacobeans abroad, but you know what I mean, that sort of 16th century castles in France. All of those things are preserved, and I think it's important that we have a built heritage in this country that is too easily and too regularly at risk, and I think that if the government needs to be putting more about that in there. And I also echo the views of other people. Councillor Hogben rightly pointed out that planning is the one area where we as councillors will have most correspondence outside those people who are complaining that their bin hasn't been emptied or because there's a pothole in their road. The earlier issues are somewhat easier to resolve, even if they are potentially more frequently occurring. But once a planning mistake has been made, it is very difficult to go back and rectify it. And so from that point of view, I think we should be, as a council, really pushing that the removal of the involvement of the public and the community in the processing of particularly significant planning applications, but even on some of the smaller scale stuff, it is a retrograde step to take that away from those people. It is their right to be able to say what happens in their homes and around their homes. And I think it's important that those points are echoed in any response that this council makes. And so I hope that Councillor Fox will be robust. I know she can be, so she will be robust in her arguments that she makes in responding to the Secretary of State on this item. Those are probably the three biggies for me. But I am very, very worried by what's being proposed, and I very much hope that whoever suggested this is persuaded to change their mind. And I certainly feel that the authors of this report appear to have a very little understanding of how the planning system actually works in reality, and it seems to be driven by perhaps a few significant individuals making their point that they don't like the way how long it takes them to get their planning permissions. Well, yes, you might not like how long it takes you to get your planning permission, but maybe if you started with a more realistic position in the first place, it might not take you so long. And also, in the whole planning process, the length of time it takes for an application to be considered is often because developers are reticent about doing what they're being asked to do by officers or by planning committees. I don't think I think it's it should be a mutually agreed process. It shouldn't be as unbalanced as it can be, whereby all the power lies with the developer and nothing with the local community. So I'm probably going to be on several people's hit lists in what I'm saying, but I feel it's appropriate. I was asked for my views, and I'm prepared to give them from the chair, but I equally expect there may be people in this meeting who don't concur with my opinions. Okay, anybody else wish to speak? If that is the case, I believe I have a proposition from Councillor Hogben that we note this report. Is that seconded, please?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Were you doing? Is that what you were proposing, Councillor Jeffrey? Because your box is just coming to my inbox.
Yeah, I was just going to second it.
Okay, that's fine. In that case, I will now do the usual, and if you can say you for, against, or not voting, and I will start with Councillor Critchley.
For.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edgar.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Groves.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Hogben.
For.
Councillor Morton.
For.
Councillor Redstone.
For.
Councillor Weatherall.
Noted. For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
I'm also for. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That has brought our meeting to the end, and I would like to report that Mr. Malcolm suggested to Ms. Baxter that we would finish at 1:30. And Ms. Baxter said to me she thought it would be nearer 3 o'clock, so Mr. Malcolm has won. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope to see you all very soon.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Take care.
Thanks, Chair. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.